and good morning to you. Happy Friday. It is still sunny outside. It is a wonderful British summer. That is something to celebrate, isn't it? You know what we're like, we Brits. We moan all the time. Oh, it's too hot. Oh, it's too rainy. Oh, it's too cold. Oh, it's too overcast. Do you know what? It's just blimmin' lovely out there, isn't it? So how about we just get on and enjoy it? And if you're outside, lucky old you. I'm sitting in an air-conditioned studio, thank goodness, but hopefully you'll be indulging in a little bit of sunshine this afternoon. Get a gin and tonic poured. Knock off work early. Go and put your feet up. Get some of UV. It's good for the mental health. Now, things that aren't so good for the mental health is everything that the Labour Party seems to do. I was sitting there the other day having a lovely glass of proper scrumpy cider, rough cider, as we like to call it in the West Country, in the garden, in the sunshine, mulling over the Labour government, thinking, is it that they actually are just like a government in photo negative? That everything that you wouldn't want a country to do is what they do. It's almost like they've got a roadmap for disaster. You know, how about you control borders? Nah, we're just going to let France knock up a deal which doesn't make any sense whatsoever and means that we don't actually get rid of any migrants whatsoever. Oh yeah, how about we bring back, lower energy bills? Nah, let's just like cover the world in solar panels and windmills. I mean, every little thing they do is the opposite of what's in the national interest. It drives me absolutely blimmin' mad. 4 more years of this, folks. Anyway, you know what we're going to do to help us survive the lot of it and keep our minds balanced and at ease? That's right, we're going to share in our misery in what I like to call a little bit of communal catharsis. And so where there's, 2-year-long waiting list to get some therapy on the NHS, don't worry, because we've got a number you can dial to let rip, to expurgate a little bit of steam, to loosen the load a bit, to sort of, get that stuff off your chest and the weight off your shoulders, because sharing is caring. And you can phone this number to talk to Auntie Alex about your agony. And it's your normal network rate, 0344 499 1000. So why don't you give me a call and we can all moan about the world together? You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp to tell the rest of the world what you really think about the state of affairs. And we'll do our best to play the lot of it out. 87222 is the number. If you'd rather send me a text message, now you've got to write the word talk before you do the body of your text. That way, your text doesn't decide it's going to go on a long holiday and sit on a English beach somewhere, basking in our glorious sunshine. No, it gets to work and it comes here in the studio on a screen in front of me from where I can read it to the nation. We're on X at talkTV. All right, strap yourselves in, folks. Let's get on. I'm joined, first of all, by the one and only, you know who I'm going to say if you're a regular listener, don't you? Chief Babber of them all, the Gert Lush, James Price, former Conservative Government advisor. Good morning to you, James.
All right, my lover.
All right, lover. Oh, I've just back from 3 days of binging on Scrumpy, and I'm like, honestly, I've still got the joy in my heart from all of that fermented apple juice. If only it could have lasted longer. Now, I did come
Alex,
back.
Before you get started, would you like my limerick about cider?
Always.
There was once a charming young bride who ate many green apples, then died. And the apples fermented inside the lamented and made cider inside her insides.
That's amazing. Well, I love it. Try saying that after about 2 pints of Roger Wilkins' best. That will be a bit more difficult. Right, now, let's talk about the news, because that's what we're here to do, as much as cider is my favourite topic of conversation. What do you make of this deal with France? Because, I was listening to the Home Secretary this morning, going out to bat at the stump, trying to make it make sense. And what I figured out is there actually isn't a plan at all, is there? They've got no idea who these people are they're going to sort of send back to France. It's only about 6% of all the people that come here. How are they going to be selected? Are people going to, when they get off the boats, be kept in a detention centre so they can't disappear into the cracks of the system? And that's how we're going to identify who are the ones to go back. Just all of it is just a madness. It is, if anything's a gimmick, it's this.
It's complete and utter rot, and nobody's going to buy it. Nobody would buy it anyway, I think, for a good long while, because Keir Starmer has so clearly lied to people over and over and over again. And as you said in the opening here, they just do the opposite of what the country needs and wants. People voted for lower immigration, it's gone up. People have voted for the boats to stop, they've got more. People have voted for the sunshine we've got, and some will probably try and turn that off at some point as well. As you say, 6% at most of the people coming over will be sent back, maybe 50 a week. Well, I think something like 700 came over yesterday alone, just whilst these things were being announced. And the European Union may still attempt to block this, so it may not even be that high. And as you said, there are all kinds of operational problems with this. I think the root of the problem is the fact that Lord Hermer, who is Starmer's busy mate, the Attorney General, a man who's never knowingly been on Britain's side, and all the rest of them will not want to deal with anything about international law, any of this kind of cobblers around the ECHR. They won't touch it. They know that that's all the stuff they can actually need to change in order to stop the boat crisis. They won't do that. So what they'll do instead is try and fill the airwaves with weird gimmick after soundbite after gimmick after soundbite to try and fool people into thinking that they're getting a grip on this. They're not doing it. No one's buying it. And by the end of their term, there will be many, probably hundreds of thousands more people who have illegally crossed over. And just let's remember, since these boat crossings started in 2018, there have been more than twice as many people, about 160,000 people, more than twice as many people have come over in small boats as we have regular members of the British Army. You should be terrified by that fact.
I am terrified by that fact, and I do wonder and question how many of these people have been sent to order by terrorist organisations, let alone the fact that most of the trafficking rings are connected to terrorist organisations. Now, should we hear Sir Keir Starmer going out to defend this policy and explaining in granular detail quite how it's going to work?
Operationalised in coming weeks, so that is a good thing. It is, of course, a pilot. It is there to prove the concept that if you come over by small boats, then you will be returned to France. Of course, being a pilot, it is very important that it works, and we need to make sure that it does work. And if it works, what it does is break the model, and that's the only way in the end to stop this vile trade. And so that's why this is a real breakthrough moment today. As I say, many governments have tried to get this far and have failed to do so. In terms of those that will be returned, I'm not going to go into the details of that because that has the potential to undermine how this will operate.
Has that got a potential to undermine how this would operate, right? Because if it's going to break the model because you're sending, like, you know, one odd oik back, the one who hasn't got tooled up with a care for Calais taxpayer-funded lawyer, you know that's going to happen, isn't it? If it's going to work, then it needs to work as a deterrent. That breaks the model. So him going, well, you know, not going to give any details, that's going to undermine the scheme. If people know who we're going to send back, then, whoa, that's going to bust the whole operation. What is he talking about? And also, operationalised. That's a disgusting word. That shouldn't exist. I mean, the point is, this is just a load of hot air. I can't see a single person being returned, especially if it's sort of top secret how they're going to return them, who they're going to select. It's just an absolute load of bump.
Yeah, well, you'd be very unlucky, wouldn't you? You pay all this money to cross over all these safe countries as an economic migrant, leaving your mum and your wife and your daughters all behind in whatever country you've left to go off and have a nice cushy life for yourself. You pay all that money to a terrorist gang to get you to cross the channel. You land on the beach and you see there are some coppers and your heart sinks thinking, oh no, they're going to take us and they're going to turn us around. And the copper goes, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Oh no, sorry, we'll get the bloke next to you, one of the 50, and we'll send him back. The rest of you, in you come. Your taxpayer-funded hotel is that way. They'll have a mobile phone in it. There's some directions to the nearest primary school, because we know how many of them are starting now hanging around outside primary schools. It is a complete and utter farce, as you say, Alex. And there was a video last week of French coppers out on the beach, and all they needed was some box cutters, smashed up some of these dinghies, and the thing sank just off the coast, and they took everybody back again. So in terms of operationalizing it, it is really, really easy to do. That's nothing to do with it. It is the fact that the lawyers say, oh no, these poor guys, they've got a right under the ECHR to come in and live off the taxpayer teat for the rest of their lives. That's the problem. Until we fix that, until we fix the fact that our leaders care more about international law than about actual British law and about the British people, this thing is going to keep getting worse. The numbers are going to keep going up, and then whichever new government comes in, whether it's the Conservatives or a Conservative Reform coalition, whatever it may be, they're going to have an even more difficult job on their hands because there will be that many more tens, if not hundreds of thousands of these people whom we need to send back somewhere. And Labour are just making the problem worse and worse, which is, of course, what they do with everything.
And, you know, talking about reform there, I've quite enjoyed watching Nigel Farage conduct his sea safaris on the English Channel, going out at 5 o'clock in the morning in a hired fishing boat, which is something he is wont to do, can I say. He is a keen fisherman. He was actually the first person to see these dinghies coming across the channel years and years and years ago, and he predicted it was going to become a major crisis. Nobody listened then. I bet they're listening now. There he was on the high seas in this green T-shirt he's owned for about 25 years. I've seen that thing plenty of times in my life. But he was pointing out quite what was going on. The French Navy escorting the boats to the halfway point, UK border force there, and then even they had some daring hijinks on the high seas manoeuvres to make sure that the life jackets the French had given the migrants were all collected up and returned to the French. They could go and give it to the next lot. I mean, it's just mad. And, you know, you look at what we do in the UK. I had this revelation. I mean, kind of it was Macron's revelation, but he's absolutely right, which is he said, you know, you guys have got to sort out your pull factor. You look at where those migrants are living in Calais, which is basically akin to some sort of shanty town. It's Sangatte Mark III. No wonder they're getting on a boat over here when they get like a hotel room, a house, driving lessons, a mobile phone, yoga classes, tickets to the footy, free transport, all-you-can-eat accommodation, jobs with Deliveroo. It's brilliant for them. I wouldn't mind being a migrant. It looks like a better life than most of us are living these days. But good old Macron, he doesn't miss an opportunity, does he, to, you know, present himself as the little petit Napoleon, emperor of all of the EU, and point out that it must be down to Brexit. Let's have a listen.
We especially have to adapt our response to Brexit. And it's that the British people were sold a lie, which is that the problem was Europe.
Hold on a minute. The problem was Europe. Let me unpack this for you, shall I, Mr. Macron? Monsieur Macron? The problem is the fact that there are no borders in Europe. So when people can broach the frontier and get into the continent, they can traipse all the way across completely undetected, going to any old country they like, accumulate on the shores of Calais. The problem, my friend Emmanuel, is the fact that the EU has rubbed its hands together going, oh, this is a brilliant opportunity to power grab. We love a crisis. We can get ourselves some more competences. And as a result, has sat there spitballing over the idea of having some sort of migrant sharing scheme. The problem, my friend, is indeed Europe, because I remember when there was a mini armada coming over from North Africa, all landing in Lampedusa, more people in one day on more boats than the entire island's population. And Giorgia Meloni was like, I'm new in power. I'm going to go sort this out. She went down to Lampedusa. She was about to say, right, that's it. The Italian Navy are going into the Mediterranean. We're going to turn boats around. We're going to take them back to Tunisia, which she'd have been absolutely right to do. But no, Ursula von der Leyen, who, by the way, is facing a vote of no confidence today. Let's see what happens. Probably nothing, but she deserves to have her head roll. No, Ursula turned up, didn't she? Next thing you know, Giorgia Meloni's plans are burning embers in the history of time. Von der Leyen standing there going, no, Italy's not going to do this. Instead, we're going to... You know, behind the scenes, von der Leyen was like, remember all those loans we gave you after the financial crisis? Remember that your, you know, bits and bobs are in a vice and we can put the pressure on you any moment economically and bring down your economy. Don't you go turning those boats around. What do you mean it's not Europe's fault? It is entirely Europe's fault. There's no other continent on Earth that has this crazy idea of having completely no borders, and Angela Merkel standing there with a placard going, refugees welcome. It is Europe's fault. It is entirely Europe's fault.
Alice, I'm not sure what I can add to that absolutely magnificent rant there. I completely agree with you. To start with, you mentioned Lampedusa, the little island. Well, it was Giuseppe de Lampedusa who wrote that fantastic work, The Leopard, where the famous line comes from, if you want things to stay the same, then things will have to change. I'd quite like for things in Europe to stay the same, or to stay what they were like maybe 25 years ago. And in order for that to be the case, things will have to change. And the things will have to change will be the European Union itself, will be the ECHR separate from it, will be these sorts of supranational bodies of unelected people who seem to be, at this point, hell-bent on destroying Europe by having the third world come in and join it. Actually, I reckon we had quite a nice civilization in Europe for the last at least 500 years or so. We seem to be making a pretty good fist of architecture, of music, of opera, of literature, of civics, of having a high quality of living, of inventing nice things and nice ways to live and having a green and pleasant land, especially here in Britain. I don't think we needed to have the third world come in and all this, but we need these people for the economy. By the way, don't listen to that. It's a complete lie. Most of these people are a complete drag on the economy, these kind of low-skilled workers, and the fact that they get to bring all of their dependents on over as well. And if anyone does try and say, oh, we know we desperately, because of an aging population, we need all these people, just get your phone out and show them a picture of the Elon Musk new Optimus robots. The fact that soon you're going to have robots who can do all of this stuff, and we don't need barbarians from the third world coming over here on the pretense of doing low-skilled wage slave labor, but actually just coming to try and take over and warp our way of life. You're completely right. Macron is completely wrong. And I'm afraid to say, whilst I want to kind of put aside the 1,000-year rivalry against France, I don't think this guy is any friend of Britain whatsoever. And we need to do what Trump would do and slap a 10,000% tariff on all French goods until he agrees to take his fair share of these guys back again.
I've got a better idea. Shall we actually put Lord Hermer to good use? Because he seems to be a big fan of giving away territorial possessions, doesn't he? He seems to like going back through the annals of history and coming up with ideas of things that don't really belong to Britain. How about things that should belong to Britain, like Calais? Wasn't it Mary I who gave that back to France? We used to own that. I reckon Hermer should go over to Macron and go, look, I've pulled out some sort of, dusty document from the annals of history. Here it is in Hansard from, whatever it was, 1600 or something, saying that actually Calais is ours. We're going to take it back. And then guess what? We're going to take everyone back to Calais, leave them there and point them in the direction of the EU. Now, there's something that's delighted me because, it's always fun watching Uncle Donald do something a little bit embarrassing, isn't it? We all love it. Of course, the lefties will squirm and get upset and go, I want to go racist. But let's have a look at this clip because this is just funny.
I just want to thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you. And such good English, such beautiful. Where did you learn to speak so beautifully? Where were you educated? Where?
Yes, sir.
In Liberia.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's very interesting. That's beautiful English.
Sure.
I have people at this table can't speak nearly as well.
Of course, the language of Liberia is English. I mean, that is just classic Donald. You've got to laugh, haven't you?
It's glorious, isn't it? But he does something, I'm more and more convinced that he does something like this, knowing that most of the media won't be able to help but to turn and say, oh, isn't he stupid, blah, 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 blah. Whilst what's actually now happening in America, of course, after the passage of the, quote, one big beautiful bill, is that the funding for ICE, which is the executive agency at Immigration and Customs Enforcement, used to have a $2 billion budget. It's now gone up to $45 billion a year. And you're seeing now ICE agents roaming across America, taking away illegal immigrants and doing mass deportations, the very mass deportations that Trump promised to do. And so that's going to make, I think, wonderful things. Wages will go up for Americans, crime will go down, the border will be secure, and we'll know that people who are there are supposed to be there. And by the way, it's a lesson that we'll all be able to learn. And yet Trump is just playing with this guy at the same time and distracting the media whilst his agents get on with sorting out America. Maybe it's another genius 5D chess move.
Well, you never know. I wouldn't put anything past Donald Trump. I just loved it. I thought it was quite delightful. Especially, it's quite sweet, wasn't it? The president of Liberia going, yes, sir, really humbly. There was something, I don't know, just the whole dynamic delighted me. And you delight me, James. I'll see you, no doubt, next week. The wonderful James Price, former Conservative government advisor, and one of my favourite human beings on the planet. You're also one of my favourite human beings. That's right, you. No, I do mean you. Because you're listening to this show, it means you've got very discerning taste and you're a patriot and you have an amazing amount of common sense, which is why I'd like to speak to you, because I think you're going to be really good company. So why not give me a call? 03444991000 is the number to dial. It's your normal network rate. You can send me a WhatsApp on that number or indeed leave me a voice note on that number, 87222. If you'd like to send me a text message, put talk before you text. Going to read out some of your messages after this break and take some of your calls. So don't go anywhere. I'll be back in just a jiffy.
making a clear jibe Nigel Farage, how he was just talking about this, but hasn't actually really suggested anything that could work. And Keir trying to say that he's used his diplomatic, actions this week to actually get some kind of deal over the line. And we saw Nigel Farage out there this morning in the channel, and actually taking video and pictures of those migrants. And he actually came across a migrant boat that was crammed with 70 people.
Do you know what? All the best things in life come with a struggle, don't they? We always have these fruit platters on floor 17 in Talk Towers, and I come in and I always sniff about what's going on in there. Nah, I can't be bothered with the apples and bit boring oranges. Nah, lychees today. Lychees. I was so excited. So I've got lychees. How on earth do you get into these things? It's such a struggle. I've been like there with my thumbnails trying to pick into that skin, spraying lychee juice all over the place. I had to like mop up my little desk here. Honest. Right, let's read some of your messages, shall we? I love this one. Gordon in Derby says, smash the gangs. Starmer couldn't smash an egg. And then he does a bit of a rant. I like this. Starmer is a compulsive, incompetent, globalist, gaslighting liar. If he told us it was daylight outside, I'd need to go outside to check. I love the UK, but I'm looking at my options to move my family out of the UK. We've become the dumping ground of the third world. Angry doesn't even come close to how I feel. You and me both, Gordon. You and me both, and pretty much everyone else listening. One in, one out. What's in it for the French? Says Paul in Belfast. Well, exactly. Nothing. And everything. It means they don't actually have to do their job. It's just a sop, isn't it? It's a sort of, sticking plaster over a gaping wound. Joe's given me some cider recommendations, saying Clarkson's cider is actually pretty good. Hawkson, I tried it. It's carbonated, which I don't really like, but it is 100% apple juice. It's okay. It's not as good as the rough stuff with the dead rat in the bottom of the barrel that comes out opaque and bright orange and looks a bit like your sort of urine if you've been on a 5-day bender. That's my kind of drink. Good morning to the... Oh, I'm not going to read that out on air, Steve. OK, well, I'll keep you entertained for the next 3 days, but I'm not going to read out such gushing praise for myself because I would seem like an egotist should I do so. And Mike says, Alex, look on the bright side. Don't keep saying it's another 4 years. It's 3 years and 11 months, and that sounds far less depressing. Indeed, it does. Right, let's speak now to some of you wonderful people. Daniel is in Epsom. Good morning, Daniel.
Alex, I love your show. How you doing?
I'm all right, my love. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really well. I've just driven through Wimbledon, actually, Wimbledon Village, and looking out the window, it's just you forget that this country's going down the toilet because you look out, everyone's beautiful and smart, and it's just, yeah.
Oh.
And then you drive on another mile and then you're in Tooting and you're like, oh, okay.
I know, right? Oh, do you know, the other day I had such a rant because I'd driven through Brent for the first time. I could not believe my eyes. It was like Dante's seventh circle of hell. What is this? But you're right. I've just come back from lovely rural Wiltshire and Somerset. And when you're out in the sticks like that, it was like a G.K. Chesterton novel. It was just beautiful, like proper cider, summer's day, a lavender farm, medieval pubs, everyone looking just lovely, upholding our British values. Cricket on the village green. It's a
I think this is what's at the heart. It's obvious and clear that most people, the majority of Britons, didn't ever want or ask for mass immigration from the third world. Most of us can see that it's destroying the fabric of Britain.
Yeah.
It's ruining our country before our eyes, and we've told successive governments that we didn't want it and that it's ruining the country, and they've ignored us basically. And I think that's dangerous because we have a government or governments that are supposed to work for us, and they're supposed to do our bidding. We pay their salary, yet they won't do any of the things we want them to do. They won't make energy cheap. They will do net zero. they're going to continue to flood our country full of people from the third world that we didn't want or ask for. Our streets are not safe. Yeah. I can't let my kids go into London for the day out like I would have done 30, 40 years ago, because the place is dangerous, and I think that is dangerous when you have a government or governments that will not do what we are their boss. They work for us.
Well, the problem is they don't think we're their boss. What they think is their boss are people who are in New York in that UN building, or Strasbourg in the ECHR, or Brussels, one of the gazillions of overpaid European commissioners. They think they've created these supranational structures that sort of essentially govern over the top of national governments, and so they think that's the boss. They forget that it's us. And you're absolutely right. And the other thing is, I bet a load of MPs, even if they've got a pretty, dark and doomy constituency, they won't be living where all the migrants are throwing dirty mattresses in their front gardens. They're not in those parts, are they? Even if your constituency is sort of one of the more run down and challenged parts of the UK, I bet the MPs are living in the sort of lovely countryside manse just on the outskirts, far enough away from the unwashed and untouchables to think that actually it doesn't affect them, so it's all okay.
Yeah, see, but it's dangerous, Alex, because what's going to happen is the next time an illegal migrant does a terrorist act or a lone wolf attack, the people in Britain are going to rise up, and there'll be civil unrest, because it almost feels like an unjust crime, because we're almost saying we told you that we didn't want something, and now we're having to live with the consequences of your inactions.
Well, you're right. If you cannot use the ballot box, and we've tried for about 2 decades to use the ballot box saying control immigration, and you're just ignored, you kind of reduce the amount of options people have. Now, I am not condoning or encouraging some form of insurrection, but you should see what's going on in Northern Ireland right now. They've had enough. They're creating these sort of crazy funeral pyres as stunts and setting them on fire, and they're pretty disgusting as a stunt. But, like you said, if you remove the facilities of democracy where people are listened to, where they feel like their views are represented, that the policies they want to see enacted are enacted, you take away that choice. You prevent people from being able to have democratic recourse, and you leave people with little option. Daniel, lovely speaking to you. Thank you so much for calling. Let's speak now to Edward, who's in South Wales. Good morning to you, Edward.
Good morning, Alex. How are you?
I'm all right, love. How are you?
I'm fine. The sun is shining. It's beautiful here in South Wales.
Oh, isn't it just? Apparently, in Wales today, it's going to top sort of 30 degrees. It's going to be the hottest part of the country and hottest day of the year for South Wales. So get out there, put on your UV and enjoy it.
That's the way. I'll be on my motorcycle later, get in the rays going across the mountain.
Oh, nice. Oh, have you got spare room on the back?
Well, yeah, could do. We could arrange that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a really good pub sort of near. Where is it? Sort of near the airport with a big thatched roof. It's called the Blue Anchor or something like that. Weird because it's inland. But do you know the one I mean? That's a great bikers pub.
I know, yeah. At the airport that's nowhere near Cardiff.
At the airport that is exactly.
But it's called Cardiff Airport.
That is correct. Right. We weren't here to talk about our plans to go out motorcycling together. We were here to entertain the nation in other ways. So tell me what's on your mind.
I think we've got to realise that the French really don't like us, and it was mentioned earlier, the 1,000 years of resentment, and I think that's pretty true, right up to almost modern times. Basically, Macron's never going to help us. No French president is going to help us. We help the French. And they just kick us in the teeth. Do
you mind if I slightly disagree with you here, Edward? I'll tell you what.
If I give you some historical pointers, you might change your mind.
Go on, give me some historical points.
Obviously, very quickly, I won't go into the deep history of it all, but obviously you've got the Duke of Marlborough, you've got Wellington, you've got all those sort of conflicts. But more recently, the Second World War, when Dunkirk, we were asked by the French government not just to take our own troops, but to take the French. So we did. And we took off the beach around about 100,000 men at the detriment of our own men. The idea being that they were going to help form the Free French Army to help us fight the Germans. And would you believe it? Only 3,000 men agreed to stay. The rest went back, repatriated under the German government and under the Vichy government. So that just goes to show you. Do
you know, I hear you, but let me defend the French a little bit here, because I actually rather like them. I know, I do. I speak French. I go to France very often, and I quite like them. And let me explain something to you. When it comes to hating the migration crisis, the average French citizen is angrier than we are. The average French citizen absolutely despises Macron. The average French citizen actually wants to vote for Rassemblement National, where someone like Marine Le Pen or Jordan Bardella, if she gets thrown in clink or not allowed to stand for public office, I believe would actually work hand in glove with the UK to tackle this crisis, because they, like us, also hate the open borders. They also despise the global elite. And so I don't, you know, when we just say, oh, well, it's the French, it might be the French Premier Ministre or Présidente, just as the same way that I wouldn't want anyone lumping me in the same category as Sir Keir Starmer. The average UK citizen thinks the Labour government are dreadful. The average French citizen thinks the French government are dreadful. So let's just hope democracy runs its course and we actually get decent governance in France, decent governance in the UK, and then we can work together in an entente cordiale to solve the problem. That's the only way things are going to get done, but I wouldn't expect anything to take place under Monsieur Macron. Thank you ever so much to Edward there. Let's have a very quick voice note from Darren, and then we'll hop off to make a cup of tea.
Good morning, Alex. Darren from Ashford. Just wondering if you ever tried Biddenden cider. Very nice drink, actually. Makes a good snake bite.
Oh, yeah, I do know Biddenden cider. It is nice indeed. Plenty of great ciders out there. I can't list them all. I'm like some sort of cider advertising service. But listen, I'll tell you one thing before you go to break. If you think cider is that stuff you get on tap in the pub, it ain't. That's 30% apple juice, usually from concentrate shipped in from China. It's got sweeteners and stabilizers, and it's back carbonated and sugars added. And even worse, they put in fruit flavors like we're all 12 years old. No! Proper cider is 100% apple juice, left to rot and go stinky and super alcoholic, and it makes life better. Right, OK, we're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, what is going on over in Reform? They're having a bit of a good season, with former Conservative Party chairman Sir Jake Berry being the latest person to go across and join that party behind the scenes. And speculation is more soon to come. We're discussing that after this. And welcome back to the show. Now, Reform UK had a bit of a bumpy couple of days, and now it's more plain sailing, it seems to me. Positive news for them in the form of Sir Jake Berry, who is a former Conservative Party chairman, very highly regarded in the party, defecting over now. Sir Jake is no longer an MP, and I don't believe he wants to return to frontline politics, but a lot of people saying as a former chairman of the party, he brings a lot of political expertise and is a good get. Let's speak now to Gawain Toler, who's former advisor to Nigel Farage. Good morning to you, Gawain. How are you, my darling?
Good morning, Alex.
Look at you! Don't you look like a picture of British summer? Where are you?
Tatchbrook Street Market.
Oh, look at that.
Just round the corner from the Warwick.
Oh, perfect, perfect. I know exactly where you mean. Great little marketplace, that. The Warwick was once upon a time my regular haunt when I lived in those parts. Now, Gawain, talk to me about Sir Jake Berry. I think that's a pretty good get by Reform, isn't it?
It is, and mainly because he's not somebody that is on the list of people we think who might jump ship to Reform. He voted to remain, though he accepted the results. He has historically been in favour of net zero policies. He is not somebody you'd immediately think this is somebody who's an absolutely close fit with Reform. But he has read the runes and he sees the failure of the current Conservative Party and the governments of which he was part. And this is a sort of holding his hands up. We were wrong. We need to do things better. The best way to do that is through Reform. In the meantime, there are others watching closely who are minded to come our way, but you know how it is in politics. People get very nervous. It's a brave fellow or woman who makes a jump into the unknown, even if they believe that's the right thing to do.
Is there a problem, though, that the Reform Party, they don't have many of their own MPs? If they have too many defections from the Conservative Party, well, there'll be people out there who say, well, this is just the blooming Conservative Party. This is rats on a sinking ship going, we're not going to keep our seats. We're going to try our luck with this outfit instead. And people are saying, well, that ends up being more of the same.
I think that may be the case, but in the case of the two people who've joined us most recently, David Jones has no intention of standing, former Welsh Secretary. He wants to help prepare us, train us, get us used to the idea and work with the idea of dealing with civil servants and the blob. That's why he's joined. It's the same with Jake. There may be a few rat runners, absolutely. But you've got to understand that the last election, we got 4.1 million votes. To win a general election, we need 12. We're not going to find them unless we are happy to reach out to people who were in other parties. And the sort of purest idea is you can only be a Reform person if you've been a Reform person for the last 3 years, means that you are guaranteed to lose. We have to win, because look at this government and imagine that for another five years.
I mean, there'll be other people sort of saying that the thing is with Reform is, are they able to actually do government? I mean, there's a strong chance, I would say, they're going to win the Senedd elections next year, suddenly find themselves not just in control of a county council, in control of an entire devolved government with no experience.
Which is exactly why people like Jake Berry and people like David Jones are so important, because they bring with them a welter of experience of dealing with departmental issues, dealing with David Jones was a Senedd member before he was an MP and went on to be Minister for Wales, so the Cabinet Minister. So having people like that with that depth of knowledge and experience is absolutely vital for us to do the hard bit, which isn't winning elections. The hard bit is delivering on the promises we make to the people of this country.
Some might say the hard bit for Reform seems to be, not just attracting people to the cause, but keeping people within the cause. I mean, it's quite unusual for a political party who got 5 MPs to have already hemorrhaged 2 of them.
And got one back. Yes, of course. But I think that is a problem of small parties. It is not and we are small in Westminster, but we are very not small outside Westminster. We're up again in the Technique poll today, up to 29, Labour on 22, Tories on 18. In a poll yesterday, we were back up to 31. Last night, we won a seat in Tewkesbury with 47% of the vote. Tewkesbury.
Yeah, and I know, being a girl from Gloucester, I know very well of Tewkesbury, lovely, genteel, gorgeous Tewkesbury.
The idea that Reform is getting almost 50% in Tewkesbury and over 50% in Bassetlaw, where the Tories dropped by 20 and Labour dropped by 42%. I mean, this is what happened yesterday.
I mean, the Conservatives seem to have decided what their line of attack is going to be, which is that Nigel Farage has now gone so far left, he's basically Jeremy Corbyn. Nigel Farage himself confessing that Robert Jenrick is going to end up to the right of him politically. A commentary in certain publications in the newspaper saying, why is he so lily-livered about discussing the fractious relationship parts of the country have with Islam? The fact that he's being perhaps a little bit too lily-livered, that the Nigel Farage of old, who essentially was the Overton window, is now trailing somewhere behind it. What's going on there, Gawain?
Well, I go back to the point. You do not win a general election on 4.1 million votes. You need 12. You've got to be able to speak to beyond your own silo. Now, Farage has made very clear about returns on legal immigration. He was out on the channel yesterday making the point yet again. He was the first person to do that. In the last couple of weeks, he's talked about nobody who comes here illegally ever gets a leave right to remain. A strong line on deporting illegal immigrants who are already here. What do you want him to do? Charge around the country with a burning cross? I mean, this is ridiculous. What do you want him to do, whilst at the same time bringing the ordinary, decent people of this country, and they are decent, by the way, with him on an agenda that will change the world? But you've got to do it in a way that doesn't have you chucked off the bridge before you get.
So some tactical work at play there. I want to get your reaction to something, Gawain, because good old little President Emmanuel Macron banging on about everything's down to Brexit, that it's been a disaster, the British people sold a lie. Let's have a listen.
We especially have to adapt our response to Brexit, and it's that the British people were sold a lie, which is that the problem was Europe.
I mean, Gawain, the problem was Europe, wasn't it? Look at that. Gawain is so aghast at that, his phone has conked out, he's fallen off his chair. Someone go to Tatchbrook Street and make sure the man is okay. Right, there you go. Gawain, astonished by the audacity of Emmanuel Macron saying that everything is down to Brexit being a lie. Right, we're going to take a short break now, considering that Gawain has left us rather prematurely. But when we come back, we're going to be digging deeper into this migration policy that what was supposed to be one in, one out, which is now going to be 94% in, 6% back out. Who? Don't know. How? Don't know. That's coming up after this.
What is occurring here is a very real increase in mental health problems in particular, and there is, now almost unquestionable evidence that is a genuine rise in poor mental health. It is not down to over-reporting. The most recent adult psychiatric morbidity survey, which is like the kind of gold standard assessment of what's going on in mental health, concluded that categorically. So we have to start talking about the underlying causes.
But is that something a government can do about? Do anything about?
Welcome back to the show. Now, before we revisit the topic of migration and the ridiculous plan that's been stitched up between France and the UK, if you could call it a plan. I mean, when it's a plan, not a plan, when it's not actually a plan at all, it's just some sort of nonsensical, vacuous headline. I think that is what we're dealing with here. Is this a nonsensical, vacuous headline? It's the latest incentive from our Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, to try and clamp down on worklessness in the UK. Now, I find myself very often not disliking Mr. Streeting. I think some of the stuff that comes out of his mouth makes sense. Well, what he wants to do now is to try and make sure that GPs are not doling out millions of sick notes. He's a big fan of making sure that there is lifestyle medicine, let's say, as in, like, get off your sofa, stop eating rubbish, do some exercise, look after your own health. That way, alleviate the strain on the NHS. And meanwhile, I'm sorry, if you're feeling a little bit sad, you don't get to not work at the pleasure of the taxpayer. Let's speak now to Michael Simmons, economics editor at The Spectator. When you drill down into some of these figures, Michael, when you look at the amount of people who are not working, I was reading earlier today that actually there are people who are on benefits for not working who are actually making $1,500, if not $2,000 a year more than people on minimum wage. And when you look at the people getting free cars under the Motability scheme for food intolerances, or someone saying, well, I've been signed off work, especially someone between the age of 18 and 25, for a year because I've got anxiety. We've got a chronic problem. We are sick, aren't we? Our policy's sick. We're the ones who need to be on the operating table dealing with how broken the system's become.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these figures yesterday that you quote there about how if you get a certain combination of sickness benefits, you can earn $2,500 more than someone working hard on the national living wage. That's clearly broke the system, right? When universal credit was brought in, the whole point was that you were never, and not just universal credit, there's this whole benefits cap that's meant to stop this very thing happening, right? It's meant to make sure that work pays and that there's no incentive to be on benefits. So something's gone clearly wrong here. But I think Wes has got a good point about GPs here, because yes, the Motability scheme examples, you know, the examples of people on with tennis elbow that are getting benefits or whatever is absolutely egregious, but that's actually, you know, a tiny part of the system, and yes, that should be stopped. But if we look at the bigger reasons why people are not in work, it's because of things like anxiety and depression, which GPs, you know, dish out sick notes for, dish out antidepressants, when I think they would say themselves they would be keener to go about these lifestyle changes that the health secretary suggested.
I can already hear the cries of discontent coming from doctors' unions where GPs will say, we're not in charge of employment. If someone comes and sits in office and says we can't work, we could only see people for 5 minutes a day. We don't have enough time with our patients to make a full assessment. Sometimes we get people who get very angry and intimidate us and threaten us if we don't give them a sick note. Meanwhile, the very entities that are supposed to look after these things are no longer doing face-to-face appointments, and there are people on, you know, social media platforms like TikTok schooling people in how best to answer questions in order to get signed off work and get these benefits. I mean, putting the pressure on family doctors to deal with this, I have a feeling there are going to be howls of discontent.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think you're totally right that, doctors don't want responsibility for this, but I mean, that is just the world we live in, and it's the current system that they work under. I mean, we should, sure, change the system, but right now, the fact is, for sickness benefits, GPs are the gatekeepers to that, and maybe the government needs to look at a way that they can support GPs to maybe give them a bit of protection, so that if someone comes after them, and says, I should have been signed off sick, but you didn't sign me off sick, that GPs have some protection, that they're not feared about these things going wrong. But I also think we have to look not just medically, but how we think about work as a society. Work is a thing that, is really helpful to people, especially with mental health problems. There's loads of evidence on this that it is helpful to be socialized, it's helpful to be distracted. So GPs could, prescribe work almost as a form of medicine itself. And I think if the public gets behind that kind of idea, then GPs maybe will be a bit more keen to go along with the stuff that Wes Streeting is suggesting.
I mean, the problem is, though, for those people who have been signed off work, saying they got mental health problems, who are not used to the morning alarm, getting up and going out to fend for themselves, people who make more money on a combination of benefits than on working, they're not going to want to give that up lightly, are they?
Sure. I mean, this is the other side, right? So we've had the carrot, but the stick has got to be that the incentive structures are absolutely set so that you can never be better off out of work. Like, that has to be, guiding principle number one of the benefit system, that in the lowest paid minimum wage job in the country, that has to be better financially than being on benefits. Because you're completely right. If we have an incentive structure where, it's easier and you can earn more money by getting various benefits and not having any pressure to look for work, if you're able to look for work, then clearly we're going to be stuck in this system that's becoming so expensive and is becoming a human tragedy. So yes, I don't know how you fix that incentive, but there needs to be a clear cap, a clear rule that you cannot get more benefits than what the average minimum wage weekly salary would be.
No, I think there needs to be a sort of clear cap on the time you can sit there and say, I still haven't found a job, because I think a lot of people are really sort of swinging the lead when it comes to how healthy they are and the jobs they want to do. And you kind of can't blame people. I mean, look, I've got this theory that once upon a time in the sort of 1970s, there was a real social shame. There was a stigma attached to worklessness, particularly for a young person. If you were starting out your life and didn't have a job, you'd be derided by your fellows. Whereas now, I mean, look, it's not even that bad to sit at home day after day. You can watch Netflix, you can play on your smartphone. It's not like you're bouncing off the walls, staring at them thinking, life should be more than this. And there's been almost this beatification of mental health. Oh, well, I can't do it because I've got ADHD, or I've got OCD, I've got some other acronym, I've got, it's just, I don't quite know how we sort of completely uproot that culture. And before I let you go, Michael, I want to ask you about projections economically for this country, because what we know is growth has come well under expectations. 2 quarters in a row now, we seem to be limping along, almost completely stagnant. How bad is it?
I mean, look, it's not good. And I think the Chancellor set a bit of a trap for herself, because in the first few months of the year, there were, fairly stronger economic growth figures, and it allowed her to go out and say that, we were the fastest growth in the G7, and it allowed her to claim we've suddenly got this money to reverse some winter fuel payment. But what the Chancellor didn't tell us is that the reason why those growth figures were a bit better than expected was because of fears about Trump's tariffs, businesses, consumers were all bringing spending and investment from the second half of the year into the first half of the year. It's kind of like a panic buying type thing, and we're seeing the effect of that now, with the figures for April being down, the figures for May that we've had today being down, and I wouldn't be surprised if the sort of Q2 figures that we'll get in the next few weeks are down as well. And that means economists are saying that in the second half of this year, we could be shrinking. So I think the Chancellor set a bit of a trap for herself, taking one good figure and saying, I've got, Britain growing again. Well, what's she going to say when that turns out really to not be the case?
Yeah, I have a feeling that we're all going to want to hide behind our sofas come September and the autumn budget, because I think all of her projections have essentially been scratched off. What did she think was going to happen? Essentially taxing employment. I mean, did she honestly think that was going to suddenly create growth in the job sector? Listen, thank you ever so much, Michael Simmons, economics editor at The Spectator. Let's do some of your messages now, shall we? Let's catch up with of them. Morning, Alex. This Labour government reminds me of the time that KFC ran out of chicken. However, they still seem to be providing us with a bunch of Whoppers, says Dougie from Birmingham. Was that something to do with, when did KFC run out of chicken? Was that something to do with Russia invading Ukraine and then not having the right gas or something to sort of bump off your poultry? I can't remember, but there was something behind it. Alex, Stalin said, if you come over by small boat, you will be returned. Just watch them redefine what a small boat is. No, if you come over by small boat, you're going to be put in a house, given a hotel, full board, driving lessons, you know, tickets to the football, free transport, all-you-can-eat buffets, a job with Deliveroo, yoga classes, a free PlayStation, and you'll have a load of leftist morons treating you like you're the second coming of Christ. Good morning, Alex, says Malcolm in Southampton. Starmer's groundbreaking deal, he says. So, boat migrants still have a 94% chance of getting through. With the risks they already take, this half-baked, ridiculous deal will be statistically irrelevant. So absolutely no deterrent. No, what would be a deterrent is if you're tool over in a boat, arrive in Dover, and you get directed to some big gnarly encampment without the all-you-can-eat buffets and the PlayStations and the free phones, and you're not allowed to go anywhere, and you've got an ankle tag on, and you're waiting to be processed to go home, because that is what they don't want. They come for the Elysian Fields, the new life aboard, and we got to make sure that they don't get it. OK, right, we are going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere, because a legend of print media is joining me after this. Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor of The Sun, is going to go through the big stories of the day. See you in just a moment. Hello there. Welcome back to the show. Welcome. If you haven't been joining me from 10 o'clock, where have you been? You're late. But don't you worry, better late than never. Welcome aboard HMS Common Sense. This is Alex Phillips with you until 1 o'clock today. Also the place that you can come to get things off your chest and share in a little bit of banter. Relieve yourself of some of the stresses of daily life by moaning, having a good old-fashioned British moanathon. It's basically free therapy, so don't go anywhere. And if you want to get on the psychologist's couch, here is a number you can dial, and Agony Aunt Alex will be there to take your call. 0344 499 1000. It's your normal network rate. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 8722 is the number to send me a text message. If you're going to do that, you've got to write the word talk before you text. Sounds like some sort of thing they'd say at primary school, isn't it? Talk before you text. We're on X at talkTV. OK, let's get stuck into the Labour government, because like I said at the start of this programme, I was sitting there thinking the other day, supping on my scrumpy in the British summertime sunshine, that everything a government is supposed to do, this Labour Party seems to do the opposite. So let's, for instance, borders, OK? What is a country? It is a defined geographical landmass with frontiers. So you're supposed to protect those frontiers. It's like an insurance policy. Everybody within those borders pays into the system and is looked after by the system. And so if you're going to breach those borders and become part of our little family, you better contribute. No, 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 no. No such thing as borders with this government. Then you've got the basics of running a country. You want to make sure your people have energy. They need electricity for manufacturing. They need to be able to heat their homes. No, 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 no. Let's not bother with that, making energy affordable. Let's have the highest energy prices in the world by buying a load of windmills from China, who are essentially our economic arch enemy. The other thing a government's supposed to do, one would assume, is make sure people can eat, that you produce enough food to be self-sufficient. So if anything goes a bit funny in the supply chain, and Lord knows what with Houthi rebels and Russia playing antics in Ukraine, that can happen at any old moment, can't it? But no, no, no. We only produce 60% of what we eat, and this government wants to paper over our beautiful agrarian fecund fields with solar panels that probably won't work, because on a day like today it generates far too much energy. I mean, why on earth would you put your energy policy in the laps of the gods when it comes to weather when you're Great Britain? We got the GERT jet thing above us, the jet stream. Our weather changes every 5 seconds. It's the most unreliable thing on earth. That's Britain's famous for it. It's why we bang on about weather all the time. And then, of course, it comes to the military. You want to make sure that your country can defend itself. No, 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 we'll cut down troop sizes to the lowest point ever. We'll get rid of our battleships. I mean, is there anything that this government has gotten right? Well, let's put that question to Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor of The Sun. I mean, here you go, the breakthrough moment, groundbreaking, he said, making this deal with Emmanuel Macron. We had it sort of leaked and briefed to the press. It'd be a one-in, one-out approach, which I kind of went, well, that means we've still got the same amount of migrants as we would do before. That ain't bringing the numbers down. But it's actually worse than that. It's 94% in and 6% out. I mean, what on earth is going on with this policy, Trev?
Well, you made me very depressed, I must say, Alex. But you're echoing, I think, the views and thoughts and feelings of the overwhelming majority, not just of your viewers and listeners, but also the country at large. I think we're in despair over the way that this government is treating the responsibilities that are sacred to all elected governments in British history, which is, first of all, law and order and defence of the nation. And law and order has been allowed to simply fragment and disappear where it's needed most. And the defence of the nation starts, as you say, with the defence and guarding of our borders. And we've simply abandoned that. And the number of people coming in is just shocking and alarming and, in fact, highly dangerous. And yet the government is coming up with these platitudes. And I think, as I've described it, it's gaslighting the British nation by pretending that they're going to do something, and we should be grateful for it. And they're doing nothing. One in, one out. It isn't even going to be one in, one out in the end. It's going to be all in at the behest of whatever the French president decides is going to happen, and who is coming and who is not. So forget it. If they don't want to get out there with their Stanley knives and actually puncture those boats, as they've proved that they can do, then we're lost.
I totally agree. And even though this is a rubbish policy, even when asked about how it would work, so who is it we're going to be sending back to France? How are you going to determine that? Where are people going to be kept? In detention centres where you can discriminate between who gets to stay and who immediately gets sent back to France? When we wanted even the most bare basic of details, this is what we got instead.
Will be operationalised in coming weeks, so that is a good thing. It is, of course, a pilot. It is there to prove the concept that if you come over by small boats, then you will be returned to France. Of course, being a pilot, it is very important that it works, and we need to make sure that it does work. And if it works, what it does is break the model, and that's the only way in the end to stop this vile trade. And so that's why this is a real breakthrough moment today. As I say, many governments have tried to get this far and have failed to do so. In terms of those that will be returned, I'm not going to go into the details of that because that has the potential to undermine how this will operate.
We especially have to adapt our response to Brexit, and it's that the British people were sold a lie, which is that the problem was Europe.
Well, the problem was Europe, actually. But, I mean, he's talking about operationalising. I don't even know what that word is. It shouldn't exist. And that this is going to break the model. It's not going to break the model. What does he think people are sitting over in sort of Songat 3.0 in Calais going, oh, well, you know, Macron and Starmer behind lecterns talking about some sort of policy that may or may not come into play? It's just absolutely ridiculous.
Well, the model should be stopping the boats, and they've broken that for sure. I mean, the performance of Keir Starmer there on that platform, I mean, he was basically being subservient to the president, the very, very unpopular and unsuccessful president of France, was pathetic. I don't know who he thinks he's kidding, because it's absolutely obvious and transparent that there's going to be no reduction in the number of boats coming across until they actually stop them leaving the shores of France. And they're not going to stop them leaving the shores of France because they don't want them in France. And so you have this situation where, as we found in Belgium, it can be curbed. As we've discovered in Denmark, there are moves which you can make which discourage the flow of migrants. And in fact, we are the El Dorado, as France correctly describes us, in terms of welfare magnets to migrants. So none of these measures are going to curb migration to this country. This is a huge multi-billion-pound business which is successful, and people are making money, and we are paying the price.
How is it that France gets away with all these migrants living like Swampy in the sand dunes in their sort of makeshift camps, being fed bowls of gruel by some do-gooders for Care for Calais, and yet we don't, that we can't do that, that we actually instead have to give over hotel places and houses and healthcare? And you go on the government website and say, if you're claiming asylum, here's all the things you can get while you wait. It's the biggest handout I've ever seen. How come France gets away with having people in tents and we give them bricks and mortar?
Well, there are obvious answers to this, which is that this is a Labour government in office which doesn't believe basically in any moves whatsoever to stop people piling in on the welfare state. And not just foreigners, but British people as well. So we are not just the international health service, we are the international welfare state. And as long as that magnet continues to operate, we're going to get these boatloads. And I mean, this is gradually changing. In fact, it isn't gradually, and it's already happened. We're changing the face of Britain from a largely white country. And I know this is going to cause all sorts of waves, Alex, but we are ending up, as Trevor Phillips has predicted, as a black country. And this surely is not what the British people of any variety are wishing for.
No, and you know, I'm going to expand upon that point because the problem is, of course, when you get people in from cultures which are dramatically different to ours, who come here for economic purposes alone. They come here because they want to earn money, send it back at home, but they got no interest in learning English. They don't want to go to church on a Sunday or mow their lawns or do the Times crossword or have fish and chips on a Friday. They've got absolutely no knowledge of Britain. They just want to come here essentially as a succubus, as a parasite for financial reasons. You don't expect them to look after the place, do you? And I had a horrifying experience the other day. when my sat-nav directed me back through Brent. I don't know if you've ever been to Brent, Trevor, but I actually thought I was in, like, Dante's seventh circle of hell. There were just people sitting, like Stig of the Dump, on top of mounds of rubbish, rotting groceries, smoking weed, graffiti on the walls, shuttered up shops. I didn't see a single British face. The place looked like some sort of post-apocalyptic scene. And I must admit, I looked at Brent and I thought, how long until it's not just Brent? How long until this actually creeps into Chelsea and Westminster? How long until most of London looks like that hellhole?
Well, it doesn't even have to be a hellhole. If you look at Mayfair, for instance, and Fitzrovia, all around that sort of area, we are now moving towards, either in the north and the east of London, towards being a sort of offshoot of Bangladesh and Pakistan, to being almost, if you go into Selfridges these days, you are entering the equivalent of a Saudi souk. And this is, so it's all sorts of levels of immigration which are changing the face of this country and have been doing so since Tony Blair opened the floodgates in the 2020s, in the early part of his reign. And he, I said to him at the time, are you aware of the changing face of Britain? Now, this is 20 years ago. And he effectively looked at me and his shadow cabinet colleagues, or his cabinet colleagues at the time, described me as a fascist for even daring to say that. So basically, the past is already sold, Alex. It's over. It's done. We're not going to reverse this, certainly not for the next 4 years. And by the time we get to the end of that 4 years, it will be irrevocable.
Do you know, I don't really know what to say to that, Trev, because I think you're right. I think the problem is, with the rate of change, with the rate of both legal and illegal migration into this country, the balkanised neighbourhoods, with now people who are sort of third, fourth generation, born in this country, but actually don't care for this country, don't share its values, don't have any connection to its heritage and its legacy and its culture and its mores. I don't really know, even if we did get a government sympathetic to our concerns, what can actually be done.
Well, this is my biggest worry, because it is impossible. You can imagine that we now have 6 million or more, 7 million, I think, immigrants who have arrived here in the last 20 years. And they have settled, in many cases have had families, and they are not going to be removable, and even if they're illegal. And many of them are, of course, now legal. So you have many cultures and ghettos opening up across the country. And they are quite resistant to any appeals for change, partly cultural, partly religious. And we, I think, will never reverse that. And I think the problem is, and you can't even call it now a problem because it's a social issue. I mean, this is one of the really serious big points, that we cannot discuss this in the sort of terms and language that come as part of our vocabulary. Our vocabulary is being changed, and this is newspeak. We are stopped from, for instance, from criticizing the faith of Islam, even though we know that nearly every single terrorist act that's taken place in the last 25 years has involved Muslims. So you can't, you are robbed of the language and the vocabulary to even tackle this discussion.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely. And you know what, even sitting in here where I think that I should have free speech and say what I want for 3 hours and cut into politicians and all the nonsense that they're talking and be on the side of the people, even I have to constantly in my head think, can I say that? Am I going to get cancelled? Am I going to have an Ofcom against me? Am I going to get into trouble? Am I going to upset the wrong person? It's like living in a prison cell inside my own mind. Oh, Trevor, that's what I call communal catharsis. We get together and we do try and have a proper conversation about these things. But like you, I'm kind of, you know, I'm despairing.
Yes, and I don't think there is an answer, frankly, Alex. I think all the answers have passed now. Any solutions would require such draconian measures that even democratic people who believe in the nature and character of this country would not accept the sort of measures that would be needed to deal with the problems that face this country. We are now divided up and down the country in towns and suburbs in ways which are irreversible, and I think not just irreversible, but are magnifying themselves as we speak.
No, you're absolutely right. The rate of demographic change is something that certainly concerns many people. Trevor Kavanagh, thank you ever so much. Ever courageous, a veteran of being brilliant in the press, basically. One of the best voices, former political editor of The Sun. Right, we're going to take a short break now. And when we come back after the break, it's your opportunity to do some heavy lifting. Throw your two-bit in and share your thoughts and feelings about the state of the world and what's going on in the news. 03444991000 is the number to dial. It's your normal network rate. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number if you'd like to send me a text message. If you're going to do that, you've got to write talk before you text. I'm back after this.
No, and for the 2,000 whatever that we are supposedly going to send back, are they not just going to fill those spaces, as it were, with another 2,000? I mean, I really, really do not know what geniuses in Number 10 and the Foreign Office and the Cabinet Office have come up with this absolutely ludicrous scheme. Politically, it is a complete non-starter. How are they going to sell that to the voter?
Hello there, welcome back to the show, or welcome aboard if you've only just joined us. Where have you been? You've been missing out on all of the fun. Right, it's that time of the show where we go to you and ask for your opinions on things. Before I do, by the way, got some news here, which is that South East Water is putting in place a hosepipe ban to hit 1 million homes in Kent and Sussex. Do you know what? The media are going to make out like this is like apocalyptic, that this is catastrophic, that it's all climate change, and oh my God, how are people going to water their gardens? Since time immemorial, we've had hosepipe bans. It's not a British summer until you have a hosepipe ban. That's just the mark of a decent period of weather, isn't it? Anyway, there you go. if you want to water your veggies over in Kent, please do refrain. You're going to have sort of wilted and withered potatoes this autumn. OK, let's go to calls then, shall we? And speak to Richard, who's in London. Good morning, Richard.
Hi, Alex. Great show as usual. I mean, it's really refreshing to hear Trevor saying what he said, because actually, with the passing of Lord Tebbit this week, we don't have people making the point that actually multiculturalism just hasn't worked. And when you think even Tony Blair admitted this after 7/7, it's pretty shocking that people now feel they can't say this. But I do share your concerns about, in a sense, you feel it's almost hopeless. And I do think the country's changed so much that it will be impossible to go back. But I think what we can do is talk honestly about where we go from here, because it seems to me that, to me, what will happen, what could happen in a country like this, where the social contract has been broken and where people feel the country's been changed against their will. Well, Alex, it's quite simple. First of all, many people will just leave, or some of the best people will leave. Others will feel that they don't really want to pay their taxes for this place anymore. And certainly, my biggest problem, I mean, if you look at what happened after the riots last year, it became very clear that due to legislation, some of which passed by Margaret Thatcher, the state can lock you up for saying something. Like if somebody hypothetically said, well, look, Enoch Powell was right, we've got all these problems. Hypothetically, you can be arrested and end up like Lucy Connolly. Now, I just say one point to you very clearly, Alex. I would never fight for a country where my own countrymen could pick up the phone or report me to the police for a treat or something. I wouldn't fight for that country. Because effectively, what's happened is you're at war with your own countrymen, and so so if we make the point that Britain is Britain, and not just Britain, and you said yourself, the French are angry about this. We're talking about Putin and defence. In a way, Alex, our country is defenceless, because if your average Joe Schmo like me won't fight when push comes to shove, you've got a problem. And I'll tell you this, if Poland or Hungary, which I regard as Christian societies and free societies, if they were under threat by somebody, I would fight for them.
But you know, I think there are still plenty of people out there. I think there are plenty of people out there, Richard, who would still stand up and fight for this country. I've just spent a few days over in Wiltshire, which is almost like the military belt of the UK. You see Union flags flapping on flagpoles outside countries, army bases everywhere, people who proudly wear the poppy on Remembrance Sunday, who will stand at the War Memorial with their medals on, who remember quite what it is to defend Britain. And I still think there are people who would. And I think that actually it doesn't take much to have a change of heart in a country if we got the right government in. And I think that the best way of dealing with this problem, yes, I do feel it's rather hopeless, because I wonder if anyone's actually going to do this, but the best way of dealing with this problem is you simply say, this is our culture, we're going to defend it, and all of these things which are not our culture, we're not going to let you do anymore. Now, that's not actually actively driving people out of the country. It's not saying you can't stay, you don't belong here, and putting into place some of those sort of more draconian policies that would send a shiver down most people's spines. It's basically saying it's our way or the highway, you make the choice. And I think that actually there are various things any government could do if they really wanted to, and you might start having communities saying, I don't want to be here because I don't want to live like this. I'd rather live in a way that I got to when I was back in Bangladesh, and find themselves getting a one-way ticket home. I think that would be a decent enough start, but the problem is there doesn't seem to be anybody in politics who seems to want to put that in place. Richard, thank you ever so much for your call. Let's speak to Mark, who's in Lincolnshire. Good morning, Mark.
Hi, good morning, Alex. I wanted to talk about Farage a little bit.
Go on then.
But also just following on from that last call you had about people fighting for the country, the guy has a point. You know, why would I choose to fight for the country when my country will lock me up for a tweet or, allow people into the country who will then try to dictate to me or tell me what my own culture is? You know,
But if we had a change of government, and the government went, no more of these non-crime hate incidents, no more political prisoners, no more chasing after people, the things they've written or things they've said, we're going to concretise the concept of free speech. No more foregoing our own culture, our own legacy, our own heritage. Someone who has the guts to turn around and say absolutely no critical race theory, no more DEI, no more stupid flags and posturing and virtue signalling by local authorities. Would you then suddenly think, OK, I do want to fight for this country? Would that change things?
Well, now we can talk about Farage, can't we?
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, because it's interesting you mentioned those points. Because let's face it, it's looking increasingly likely that Reform are going to make government next time round. I accept that. However, the very points that you're making there, Farage, I don't believe, is going to do anything about those things. He isn't going to solve the migrant crisis. I mean, in his recent interview with Nick Ferrari now, he's basically aspiring to deport illegals. He's not making any commitment. Every commitment he makes, he goes back on.
I mean, is there not I'm going to play devil's advocate here. We are, first of all, we're 400? We're 400 years away from the next election. Blimey, I really am doom-mongering today. No, we're still 4 years away, essentially, from the next general election, so we don't know what's going to happen over the course of those 4 years. We were speaking to Gawain Toler, who for a long time was part of the operations of UKIP when Nigel Farage was the leader, and he's sort of saying, well, look, what Nigel's got to do, eyes on the prize, is he's got to get into number 10 first. No point turning around going, I'm going to do X, Y and Z if he's scared off a load of the sort of, soft middle class of the UK, who he will need to vote for him if he's going to get enough votes to get over the line and become the Prime Minister. And so there has to be a little bit of political pragmatism here. Do you think that that's what's going on, that actually perhaps when it comes down to it, I've always said this, right, because I've known Nigel for decades, that out of all the politicians in the UK, if anybody understands, what someone's particular convictions or ideologies is, it is Nigel Farage. He's always been, the extoller of Farageism. That actually, out of all the wishy-washy politicians out there, at least we kind of know he is a man who believes in no supranational governance, none of the globalism nonsense, and secure borders.
But do we, Alex? This is the point I'm trying to make. You're talking about, yes, he's got to go into government first. I agree with you to an extent. To some extent, he has to be careful in what he does, what rhetoric he does use. Because obviously, he can't just rely on votes from people like myself that are quite hard line about things like deportation and remigration. I get that. However, he's already wishy-washy. He will come out with something.
Do you think he's always been wishy-washy, though?
Sorry?
Do you think he's always been wishy-washy?
Yes and no. I think in his earlier days, probably the UKIP days, he certainly wasn't.
Right. So what's changed then?
I think, honestly, he's grown tired. I think he's, I'm not convinced he actually particularly wants to be in office.
Well, he doesn't have to be. He could be presenting his show and making a lot more money then. He decided to come back as leader, didn't he? Why would he do that if he didn't want to? He'd earn a lot more money commercially if he wasn't doing that.
I think he'd like to make his point by getting Reform elected as government. My own personal opinion about it is I believe he will either step down in the first year or two, or he will step down just before the next election.
Oh, not a chance, mate. Not a chance. As someone who knows Nigel pretty well, that I'd say is definitely not going to happen. The rest of it, who knows? I don't have a crystal ball whether or not, he will end up in number 10. And when he's in there, what he can do and what he would do. That much, I guess, we don't know. But a very interesting point zone. It's been lovely having a conversation with you, Mark. Let's have a few voice notes, shall we? This is Stuart.
Hi, Alex. People keep saying that the French hate Britain. I don't think that's the case. Our problem is Starmer hates Britain. What chance do we have with this idiot in control?
That's my point exactly. The French don't hate Britain. They are, mind the pun, in exactly the same boat as us. They don't like their migrant crisis. They've got a great amount of sympathy for ours. I think the French would quite like to see a sort of Marine Le Pen or Jordan Bardella party come in and actually work with the British and turn around, stick two fingers up at Brussels and say, listen, we're going to solve this our way. We just need a bit of a political miracle to allow that to happen. And unfortunately, of course, over in France, you got old Macron playing games with Olaf, the European Forward Office, from 20 years ago going, oh, look, Marine Le Pen employed some staff and they shouldn't have been doing this at EU level and domestic level and she might not be able to run for public office because guess what? When the global elites want to spike the potential of a populist wave, they will pull any lever in order to do so. So let's hope that they get defeated and populism triumphs. Here's a voice note from Henry.
Hi, Alex. So, Starmer, another U-turn. He said the only way is to break the model. I thought the only way was to smash the gangs.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the man doesn't have a way, does he? Don't know what he's doing, doesn't know what he's talking about. He's not a politician. He's a bureaucrat, and a rubbish one at that. OK, we're going to be taking a break now, but when we come back, we're going to be discussing everything going on in London. Oh, I've been having a moan about Brent, haven't I? Let's have a moan about Mayfair next, because everyone's basically getting robbed at knife point. A disgusting, disgusting murder of a man after some vile thug tried to steal his Rolex. We're going to be discussing that with former Minister for London, Paul Scully, after this. Now, if, like me, you live in London, you will have noticed a huge decline, frankly, in the safety on our streets. Once upon a time, if someone got stabbed in broad daylight by a machete-wielding lunatic, it would be front-page news. Now it's just kind of normalised. Oh, well, there they go again. The kids in the balaclavas with their zombie knives just stabbing each other up in the street. Also, once upon a time, I remember when I worked years ago near Berkeley Square, and I'd walk to and from work on my phone like this. It was when I was head of media for UKIP, and I couldn't be a moment without that phone in my hand. It rang off the hook 24/7. And so the minute I surfaced from the underground at Green Park, I needed to get on the blower and catch up with about 25 missed calls. And so I'd walk through Berkeley Square, chatting away to this person, that person, messaging. I couldn't do that now because someone would probably come and mug me. In fact, someone's tried to mug me 3 times in the past year. 3 times I've had someone attempt to snatch my phone, and it is blimmin' scary. You now, in London, you think to yourself, I don't know where I'm going. I've got to get to this restaurant, and you dare not get this thing out to find your way. You daren't, especially as a woman. I think 75% of the victims of things like phone thefts are women because they target a woman by herself. When I used to live in Westminster, I'd go to the pub, go to the good old Mog for a booze, and I'd walk home at 11 o'clock at night. I wouldn't do that now. I wouldn't dare. And I still consider Westminster to be one of the sort of sleepier, safer parts of London. Even 4 years ago, when I first moved to West London, I used to pootle about, walking down the street, never really had a care in the world. Now, especially if I've been to work and I look like a Barbie with my blonde hair and my makeup on, I'm terrified of getting off that tube, because I know a load of grisly ne'er-do-well men are going to be leering at me, are going to be following me, at the very least with their eyes, tracking my every move as I go down the street, you know, salivating after me like the lechers that they are. And it makes you seriously, as a woman, not want to leave your house in high heels or makeup, or with your hair down. Actually makes you want to wear a blimmin' burqa. And just existence in London is miserable. It's psychologically miserable, because even if you're not being mugged, even if you're not having your phone robbed, even if on that particular day no one does lech after you, the problem is you're already having to live your life every single minute, every single hour, with the distinct possibility that if you don't take preventative measures, if you don't take precautions, then those things will happen. And that is utterly ghoulish. It almost makes life not worth living, which is why I'm leaving. I ain't living in London anymore. I'm getting out. I've had enough. Let's speak now to former Minister for London, Paul Scully. I don't think what I've just said there is particularly dramatic or distinct. I think a lot of women, perhaps a lot of men, feel like that. And based upon this horrific story of the 26-year-old father killed outside a five-star hotel because some absolute disgusting barbarian wanted to get his watch. You know, if you live in London, you know you cannot wear an expensive watch in the capital city because it's basically red rag to a bull. But someone being stabbed right in their abdomen because someone wants to snatch their watch. I mean, is this what we've become now in our capital?
Well, look, there's a lot to unpick there, Alex. And you know, first of all, let's take the awful case of Blue Stevens that was murdered, as you say, outside the hotel. And we've been fortunate in many ways up to date that actually a lot of knife crime hasn't been in this sort of form with, you know, often it's in particular areas, often stoked by things like gangs and the like. It's not often that someone is just blatantly stabbed in the middle as a result of a bungled theft, fortunately. However, we've got to make sure that when we are talking about general London things, we don't say that it's just suddenly a crime-ridden capital, because it's not necessarily. I know there are cases that you're describing and people who have been a victim of crime will be thinking about this. But, you know, we still, tourism is down, investment is down. There's a lot of reasons for that, but part of that is because we keep talking London down. Now, to pick your point up about your situation, clearly I'm not a woman, and I know the definition of a woman, so let's just get that. But the fact of the matter is that there are people that have always felt worried about living in London. Do you remember steamers that used to go out tube chains and just with bags and just steal everything they could find? I've seen that happen on bikes with people, as you've talked about, having their phones nicked with 3 or 4 electric bikes, and they are just gone in a second. I nearly had mine done, but because I only didn't have mine nicked because they nicked a phone of a woman about 20 yards away from me.
I mean, what needs to happen? I mean, look, my sense is I've been living in London for well over a decade, and actually in the last 2 years it's palpably changed, certainly for me and where I live. Palpably. I had never had a sense in London before of feeling constantly on edge, and now I do. Maybe it's because of all the negative chit-chat, but like I said, I managed to live 10 years in London without being mugged once, and in the past year there have been 3 attempts. So if I'm just going to use my sort of sample size of 1 and the empirical data from that, you know, it's enough reason for me to go, I don't want to be here anymore. But what has gone on? Why is it sort of, you know, why is there this sense of people? And it's not just me. You get people visiting London from abroad, finding that, you know, there's a different level of crime than there used to be. Why is it falling apart?
Well, look, if people like you, Alex, were street smart and sassy, you know your way around London and what have you, if you're leaving, actually what's happening is we're hollowing out London, leaving effectively tourists in the middle, and then you become like a tourist hotspot like anywhere, where there's always been pickpockets in Barcelona and places like that, and you know, with signs everywhere. And we're getting back to the New York of the 70s and 80s, when you absolutely have to grasp it, and the mayor is doing anything but grasp it.
Well, that is the difficulty, because it seems to me he obfuscates, he bangs on diversity as our strength. Even the ULEZ scheme, we know that this is essentially hollowing out London, the empty shops everywhere. How on earth what's happened to Oxford Street has happened? Like I said, when I first moved to London over a decade ago, at the weekend, something to do would be to get into town and just bimble about the high street, essentially. Go in and out of House of Fraser, John Lewis, that big top shop, bit of window shopping. It was an activity. You go to Oxford Street now, and unless you want to buy something from a candy shop or a vape, there's absolutely nothing to do. What should be our flagship shopping street is a disgrace.
You see a lot of people in Oxford Street that are hanging around but not spending money, so it's hardly surprising that any retailers can survive there, and it's left to the candy stores, as you rightly say. And again, the whole point about safety in London is safety in numbers. Whether it's on the tube, on the high street, if you've got a lot of people around, you're going to feel safer. But if you're just hollowing it out, as we've been talking about, whether it's tourists or whether it's just after a particular time because, you know, the nightlife is dying on its feet, that it's hard to get a drink after a particular time, then people, especially women, are going to feel really unsafe in the middle of London. And that's something we've just got to reverse.
I mean, how do we reverse this? Because, you know, you're talking about it being hollowed out. It's also about rental prices, isn't it? My rent has gone up in 4 years by £1,000 a month. £1,000 a month, right? And what have I got in return for this? Nothing but a deterioration of my quality of life. And just simple things like you walk over Westminster Bridge and it's covered in sort of, you know, people doing illegal gambling and roasting their chestnuts. Like, you know, I'm like, what is this? Why can't we just say, you go, you go? You're not allowed to do that. You're ripping people off. No more candy shops, no vape shops. We want small independent businesses actually selling wares that people want to buy. I mean, it's just everything just seems to be falling apart constantly and no one's grasping the nettle.
Yeah, you could have a permanent patrol on Westminster and you'll always pick people up, as you rightly say, doing the find the lady and those kind of things with their dodgy people around them that are whipping up tourists to spend a load of money in what is effectively a scam. You get, I think it's Albania Independent Day once a year when you've got all the supercars just honking their horns up Westminster Bridge. You know, you don't end up with a load of supercars like that in one street without something going on. And so you could pick up a lot of that. But then you look at Oxford Street, as I say, and you're right, that first of all, rents went up in properties, in residential properties after COVID. They've been dampened down in COVID. They went up. You've got to build more houses. You've got to have proper partnerships with developers rather than the developers. They've got big plots that only release 600 or so a year, so they don't dampen the market for themselves. You've got to change that and break that. So it's all about supply side. Businesses need a cut on their business rates. The business rate model in London is just totally lost. You raise more business rates. The government raised more business rates in the West End of London than the whole of Wales. That just how can you keep a business going on in that instance?
Yeah, it just seems to me like everything in London now is being run by cartels. I just don't understand how you've got these vape shops and these candy shops and these souvenir shops and they can somehow pay the business rates and yet some of our biggest retailers have shipped off.
Oh, but it's because they're here now and then gone, you know? These people are filling a void, and do they pay the business rates? A lot of them, I don't think they do. So, you know, we've got to stamp down on it so much more. I know Westminster Council's doing a bit on it, but I think the mayor just needs to take a strategic grip. So not just Westminster Council or Camden Council, whatever. You've got to have something. That's sort of the point of the Mayor of London. Otherwise, what is the point? Just leave it to the boroughs and the police. But if you're going to have a Mayor of London, they've got to just, as I say, grip it, get everyone together, bash heads together and say we're not leaving this room until we've got a decent solution for policing the streets of London, making people feel safe, taking the electric bikes off the South Bank and Oxford Street, Regent Street, those sort of places where they can just steam down, the mopeds, etc. And of course, carrying on the work to get knives out of people's hands in the first place.
Oh, yeah, don't worry. They're going to pay people £5 for every knife they return. And Sadiq Khan's grand plan is to just legalise cannabis because it disproportionately affects a certain community. Oh, make it make sense. Paul Scully, former Minister for London, thank you ever so much. Now, like I was saying earlier, bemoaning all the things that this government is doing wrong, Like, it's not helping farmers, and eating food is pretty important. It's not bringing down energy bills and heating your home and being able to power your factories and your industries is pretty important. And you would think as well, in a really unstable world like the one we live in right now, particularly when we know you've got terrorists in the form of Houthi rebels attacking cargo ships in the Red Sea, you've got Russia wargaming, buzzing the north coast of England with their big bear planes. You would think that it would be vital for a country to look at its defences and say, right, we better make sure that we are prepared. But oh no, this government once again seems to be doing the exact opposite of what they should be doing. In fact, the Royal Navy are now scrapping 2 warships as Britain's fleet shrinks to its smallest size, and get this, in 500 years. That's right, we're discussing that after this break.
I lost my seat back in just over a year ago now, where I was sort of talking to friends, I was talking to my family, and we were having long discussions about, Britain is so broken. Maybe we should think about leaving. And in fact, lots of my friends have left the country. We saw this extraordinary figures,
we all know people
16,500 people in the last year. And I've always cared deeply about Britain, the community. That's why I first ever stood for Parliament back in 2010. And I thought, no, I want to fight. I want to stay. This is my country. I love my country.
Welcome back to the show. Let's get straight into our next story, because we're joined by Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry, CBE, former Royal Navy commander. How alarmed are you at the fact that the Royal Navy is now scrapping 2 warships and our fleet has shrunk to its smallest size in 500 years?
Well, Alex, good morning. Good morning, everybody. We should be alarmed, frankly, because it's a level of strategic incoherence that this country really can't afford. I'm sitting here today, believe it or not, in Portsmouth's historic dockyard. And if we're not careful, we're going to end up in a situation where the naval base next door is going to look a lot like a historic dockyard as well. if we don't get moving. The real problem we've had, Alex, is that the country's been over-invested in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I'm afraid successive governments, not just this one, have failed to recognize that Russia is returning and China is rising massively right now at sea. And they didn't react in time. You'll know, because we've had this conversation before, I wrote a book in 2014 saying what the world would be like in 2025 and the sort of navy that we would need. And it was given a stiff ignoring, despite the fact that I know a lot of politicians sort of read it as well. So we're here because we failed to actually plan for the future and forecast what we need.
Now, some wise egg was once explaining to me, it was actually a rear admiral from the US Navy, saying, Alex, it's all about the maritime routes. This is what our adversaries have clocked. This is what they want to control. This is why the Chinese have their Belt and Road Initiative, where they're building things like dry ports and docks and all the rest of it, all around the various coastlines, because what they have sussed out, what Iran has sussed out by trying destabilising the global economy via their proxies at the Houthi rebels, what Russia has sussed out in its efforts to get hold of Odessa to add to Crimea, is if you control the waterways, you're essentially controlling the global economy, because so much of our cargo, whether it's food, whether it's fuel, whether it's just rubbish we buy from some sort of factory in China, is all shipped around the place. And if you can control that, you're basically the master of the universe. China's even, getting a load of sand and dumping it in the middle of the ocean to create fake atolls, sticking their flag on it and going, oh, look, this is Chinese territory now and the 200 miles surrounding it. So why on earth does this government and successive governments not understand that actually out of all of the things that we need defensively, a strong maritime presence is pretty key?
Well, it's called sea blindness, Alex. If I can pump my book again from 2014, it was actually called Superhighway. And what it said was the sea is the physical equivalent of the World Wide Web. So if you don't control the sea, and that's something that goes back beyond 500 years, you don't get to control either globalization or indeed your interests around the world. And I made it quite clear in the book that part of that was undersea cables, the choke points around the world, like the Bab el-Mandeb, the Red Sea and all that. This is not news. It's been known for hundreds of years. We built a complete empire and trading network in the 18th century on this basis, which is why the Navy was so strong and why the country was so rich. The Chinese are looking at us and saying, well, we can do that in reverse. In fact, I've challenged Chinese academics recently, and I said, you're doing to us what we did to you in the 18th and 19th centuries. And they say, you're absolutely right. And unless the free world now gets its act together and says, if we don't control the world ocean, when we have the Eurasian autocrats controlling Eurasia and possibly Africa as well, we'll find ourselves shut out from the world economy, and also from the bulk of the assets and resources around the world.
And it's very easy to see how just a little bit of disruption in the maritime supply chains can really have a huge impact. I remember when that Gert boat got stuck in the canal and it couldn't be, what was it called again, that thing? It couldn't be turned around. It was there beached for weeks and people are like, oh my God, I'm going to panic buy toilet roll. But can this stuff be reversed, Chris? Is it just about strategy, or is this now a situation where we're going to need so much money to pump into the armed forces to actually replace these warships and add to them that we're already a lost cause?
Alex, we've got a hiatus at the moment in shipbuilding. We've got the Type 26, Type 31 frigates coming on board. We've got pretty good nuclear submarines. We've got our aircraft carriers. But what everything lacks right now is the political will. 30 years ago, we would have gone out to the Red Sea with probably 4 warships with the Americans, and we would have devastated anybody coming off the coast of Yemen. It just needs the political will to go out there, police the seas. The Houthis are acting as pirates, as the common enemies of mankind, and we need to deal with them on that basis. We've got into what I call a strategy of wishful thinking. The world ain't like that. There are a lot of bad people out there. They need sorting out. The Navy is really good at that sort of thing, and they need to get out there and do it.
I cannot believe, looking at the armed forces as a whole, when you look at our active personnel, it is a woeful, is it around 50% of what it used to be even in the 1980s? How can we've hemorrhaged so much manpower?
Oh, crikey, Alex, how long have you got? I mean, part of the reason is we're attracting the wrong sort of people. We're attracting people for self-interest and vanity rather than doing something for your country and making a difference. And secondly, frankly, the conditions of service are appalling. You've only got to look at the accommodation ashore that are provided across all three services. You've got to see all the things that have been eroded. I used to say to my sailors, Marines, airmen and soldiers, you play at international level. And, you know, you've got to be that good if you play at international level. And it's not just another job. And we have to say, we've got to give them some slack in terms of conditions, in terms of pay, and in terms of allowances. Everything has been squeezed over the last 30 years. It's not just like working on a high street retail shop. It is going in harm's way, and it's actually doing an exceptional job for the country. If that's the case, people need to be recognised and rewarded for that.
No, I couldn't agree more. There is no nobler profession, frankly speaking, than those who are prepared to put themselves in harm's way to defend this country. And I just want to say, before I let you go, thank you for your service, because Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Perry, CBE, former Royal Navy commander, has certainly spent most of his life making sure that we are safe. OK, let's do some of your messages before we go to break. I was whining about London, wasn't I? Because, well, it's a hellhole. Gail in Harrogate says, my son lived in London for 3 years and we loved visiting regularly. When he returned to Harrogate, we still visited at least twice a year because we enjoyed it so much. We stopped visiting about 3 years ago as we just have no desire to go there now, as it seems to be a cesspit. So sad. I think the other problem is stuff is just, you can't afford it anymore. I mean, when I first lived in London, if I wanted to go and watch something at the theatre, you could get a last-minute cheap ticket that wouldn't break the bank. Now to even go and see a dreadful musical in the West, everything's a musical now, you don't get proper theatre anymore. You pay about 200 quid for a nosebleed seat. Anyway, I think the pandemic probably had a lot to do with that. Alan says, I'm 6'5", shaved head, not typically the sort of person you'd target if you're mugging someone. And even I feel uncomfortable with my phone out in the city with the gangs happy to carry and use machetes. No, exactly. And someone says, Alex, don't be so naive. The candy shops, vape shops and Turkish barbers are all money laundering, drug and other criminal money. I know. Well, no, that's what I'm saying. It feels to me like most of London these days is actually being run by criminal cartels. They've got the whip hand over us. Anyway, we're going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere because one of my favourite human beings on the planet is going to be here in the studio to add a few fireworks to the afternoon, because it's my old television husband, Kevin O'Sullivan, who's going to be letting off some steam right here just after this. Put the kettle on and I'll see you on the other side. welcome back to the show, or welcome if you've only just joined us. Why? Where have you been for 2 hours? We've been missing you. Yeah, we've been waiting for you. I don't know why you're so tardy today. What's more important than this? Getting it off your chest, having a bit of shared therapy, bemoaning at the state of our nation together so we might feel a little bit better. Oh, OK. You were having an early cocktail in the summer sunshine. Well, I can't blame you, but I'm glad you're here with us now. And guess who else is here with us now? Oh, yes, my favourite is Mr. Kevin O'Sullivan. Things are about to get fun. How are you, Kev?
This is the point where I say, good morning, Alex, and you go, no, it's afternoon
It's
now.
actually afternoon now.
Good
Yeah.
afternoon, Alex.
Good afternoon. Have you had a nice weekend? Oh, no, it's not my weekend.
What are you
It's
talking
my
about?
weekend. I've had a nice
The
few
weekend
days.
is just about
Been
to
enjoying the
start.
sun. No, for me, it's like I literally, it's been my weekend, and I have had a nice sort of Alex weekend. But enjoying the summer sunshine, or are you going to moan about it?
I like the sunshine. I like the hot weather. It's a bit unbearable on the tube system here.
It is any time of year.
You know, on the London Underground, this is a fact that when the weather gets like this and the temperatures down in those tunnels soar, they soar to levels that it would be illegal to transport animals in. It's true.
Really?
So we're on those trains, and you would not be allowed legally to put sort of cattle or anything like that in those temperatures.
I read somewhere, this is the Central Line, or one of the particular underground lines, has its own species of mosquito. They live down there. They're set up shop.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh, it's disgusting. I got a bit of breaking news, actually, before we get stuck into all the other stuff we're going to moan about. This is quite interesting. So, get this. Big Angela Rayner,
I've seen this,
her of the unions. Didn't she work for Unite once upon a time?
Yes,
She's been booted out. She's been booted out over the Birmingham bin strike, and it's also going to review its relationship with the Labour Party. Good, I say. Wouldn't it be fun if the unions and the Labour Party have a little falling out and the whip hand is removed from Sir Keir Starmer and he can suddenly become a right-wing Prime Minister?
Well, the Trade Unions Conference has voted, the Unite have voted to, quote, discuss our relationship with Labour. And they clearly feel, and this is what's happening with Labour now. After a year, these idiots in our government, Keir Starmer and his motley crew, have realised that the Labour ideology, the socialist ideology, is not commensurate with the real world. So they're having to push right and right and right. I mean, they might not like it. You know, even this ridiculous deal, we'll talk about it in a minute, the migrant swap deal, is actually a move to the right. Everything that Starmer is having to do is a rightward shift, because that's the real world.
Right.
And the unions just don't like this.
What's
and they
going
won't
on with the unions? Once upon a time, the unions existed so that average Joe Soap, pushing broom in a factory, could stand up to the man. Now what unions seem to do is make everyone wave trans flags and bring a load of immigrants in to compress wages.
Exactly right.
Mad.
No, I mean, they too are in a sort of existential crisis as well. What do they stand for these days? I mean, I date back to the times where they basically ran the country, where they were all powerful. Union leaders were huge stars in the British culture. Everybody knew the name of every union leader. Now you never know it. But it's Angela, Big Ange, will actually she'll detest the fact that they've kicked her out, and it's because she's been urging the bin strikers in Birmingham to accept the deal, and Unite don't like that. Now, if Unite, as they discuss their relationship with Labour, conclude we're not going to give them any more money, it'll be a really interesting parting of the ways.
Do you reckon they'll go to Magic Grandpa instead? Because they might be looking, I don't know, maybe they're looking at that new party, whatever it's called, Fruit and Nuts, someone suggested, considering it's Sultana and Corbyn.
Jezbollah. But I'll tell you about that party, though. I think we talked about this last week. Old Jeremy Corbyn and that idiot Zara Sultana. I mean, they can both go to hell as far as I'm concerned. Dreadful people who stand for everything that I detest. However, I really do wish their party well.
Oh, no,
because it'll split the Labour vote. All those
amazing.
lefties on the backbench will gravitate towards it. It could be quite interesting.
No, he's hoping. I'd love to see the sort of dismantling of the left wing once again. Bring back Magic Grandpa. He was very useful in in that regard.
Yes, wasn't he?
Get off that allotment, get back in and mess things up. Now, what do you make of this? Like, I mean, every time the deal. What is
the
that?
swap a migrant deal.
Actually, migrant swap sounds like a good Channel 4 show. You should.
Migrant swap,
you should go to go to some TV commissioner and propose that.
Yeah, be like Big Brother, you know. Should he go back to France? You decide. You know, I mean, it's the deal. I mean, we could talk about it's hilarious.
I got so many questions.
Ludicrous. Now, in the press conference, the political lobby, you know, as usual yesterday at the press conference between those two gormless globalists, Messieurs Starmer and Macron, as they stood there, the political lobby managed one decent question. They didn't ask many more. The one decent question that one of them asked was, you're going to choose 1 in 17 migrants to go back to France, Mr. Starmer, Sir Keir, sorry. What's the criterion? How will they be chosen? What reason will it be that you pick on that 1 in 17, which of course is really crucial to the equation? And Starmer said, we're not going to go into that now. Translation, he has no idea.
No, but also, see, actually, let's watch the clip, shall we? Because I think it's even worse than that. Here he is. Take it away, Sir Keir.
Be operationalised in coming weeks, so that is a good thing. It is, of course, a pilot. It is there to prove the concept that if you come over by small boats, then you will be returned to France. Of course, being a pilot, it is very important that it works, and we need to make sure that it does work. And if it works, what it does is break the model, and that's the only way in the end to stop this vile trade. And so that's why this is a real breakthrough moment today. As I say, many governments have tried to get this far and have failed to do so. In terms of those that will be returned, I'm not going to go into the details of that because that has the potential to undermine how this will operate.
We especially have to adapt our response to Brexit, and it's that the British people were sold a lie, which is that the problem was Europe.
Oh, hold on, let me get this right. Operationalise. He says that this is great because it's going to prove the concept that if you come over by small boat, you will be returned. And therefore people won't come by small boat because you'll break the model. OK, so great. How? Well, if you give details, that will undermine it. No. The whole point is you need the details so people go, oh, God, that might be me. I ain't going to get on that boat. Instead, well, it's a mystery.
Well, it means that he doesn't know how they're going to choose the 1 in 17. And by the way, so this is supposed to be a deterrent, right? The idea, so the migrants coming across from France, as about 700 did yesterday, by the way, while these two idiots are telling us, I think we've cracked it. No, you haven't. So the migrants that come over, 1 in 17, the odds on them getting returned, any of them getting returned, are 20 to 1 on. So you've got a 20 to 1 on chance of remaining in Britain. That is not a deterrent. There are so many other questions. OK, so apparently the French will give us one of their migrants who has been tried, tested and has relatives in Britain or something like that. And then we send back one of our illegals. Now, OK, so we've done that on the off chance it ever happens. But then what happens to that migrant? I'll tell you what happens. He does a U-turn and he proceeds directly to Calais and gets on the next dinghy to Dover.
Exactly.
It's ludicrous.
Who's this going to be? How are you going to select them? Are they all going to be in a detention centre being vetted, and that way you're going to pick the 1 in 17? When they go back to France, what there? I mean, it is just the most pointless, pathetic posturing.
I've got to say one more thing as well. So the plan is 50 a week. That adds up to 2,600 in a year. Conveniently, I can tell you how many migrants came across last week. 2,599. So essentially, 2,600 came across last week. That's how many Starmer's fixing to send back to France in a year. And today, he's beginning, as you just alluded to, he's beginning to indicate that migrants now, when they come across the channel, will be detained. Where?
Why aren't we doing it now?
Where?
Anyway, I won't worry about it because the EU look like they want to scupper it anyway.
The EU, you've got Cyprus, Malta, Greece, Italy and Spain have already written to the European Commission to say we're not having this because we don't know what's going to happen to these British migrants when they'll end up with us. So once the EU gets its teeth into it, that will scupper it. More to the point, you know, immigration lawyers, our money-grabbing immigration lawyers, they're going to be all over this like a rash. I bet Andrea Jenkins on the air last night, I bet her 10 quid. I should have bet her 1,000 quid. I said, I bet you 10 quid that we don't manage under this scheme to send a single migrant
because
back.
they'll all get their Care for Calais lawyer paid for by us. It's a bit like when we had one person on a blimmin' aeroplane to Rwanda because he was Rwandan and had $3,000 to go home. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Unless you stop these lawyers, you can't win.
Exactly. The immigration lawyers will scupper it. The EU will scupper it. Everything about it is a joke. There's only one thing I like about it.
What's that?
Is it's really, really upset Care for Calais.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah, although they're very, very fed up about this. It's a human... You're trading in human beings.
What motivates people to go and be in Care for Calais? Like, who are these weirdos who decide that that's a great thing to do with their lives?
They're like people like Richard Hermer and Keir Starmer. They don't like Britain. They want to undermine Britain. They want to undermine our culture, our traditions and everything about this country. That's who Care for Calais are.
Ugh. Can't stick them. Now, I've got to talk about this because the UK never fails to astonish me on the levels of self-indulgence, the profligate waste. We go about the world like we're sort of like, you know, Saudi on sea. We got all the money to spend on Lord knows what, on all these wonderful, vainglorious schemes. And the Motability scheme has to be the most ridiculous thing. I didn't even know it existed. I got eczema. Where's my Lamborghini? That's what I want to know. But people getting free cars.
I got a hangover. Can I have a car?
Right.
I mean, probably. Do you know how many Motability cars we gave away last year?
How many?
To people with conditions like constipation and tennis elbow. It's true. We gave 20 free cars to people with constipation.
Why do you need a free car for constipation?
We gave 40 to people with tennis elbow. We gave more than 32,000 to people with anxiety and depression. Why do you need a car if you've got depression or anxiety? And last year we gave away 589,000 brand new cars to claimants. 500.
That's way over 500,000 cars.
Yeah, so 1 in every 5 brand new cars in this country are purchased by the Motability scheme.
Hold on. Go back for those stats. How many cars?
589,000.
589,000 cars? That's blimmin' bonkers.
I know. It's absolutely... 1 in every 5 new cars is bought by the Motability scheme. It is sitting right now on a pool of £4 billion worth of new cars ready to be handed out to the next guy who's having trouble going to the loo.
This is absolutely... I mean, this is literally part of when people like Macron go, you've turned your country into an El Dorado. Of course we have. We're just like doling out cars to someone who can't take a dump.
Yeah.
I mean, you would think, actually, if you had the other problem...
I was thinking about saying that, but I left it to you.
If you had the other problem and you needed to get to a loo quickly, that might be more of a reason to need a car. But if you've got constipation, what?
Do you know the original idea of the Motability scheme, which I kind of approve of, this is for people who genuinely can't get around, that every single one of these cars needed to be modified, you know, with extra blocks on the accelerator or whatever, because they were for people with physical disabilities who do genuinely have trouble getting around. So I'm all for giving them the help they need. But it has expanded into a grotesque, obscene waste of British money.
Save them a bob or two, because if you've got constipation and you need your car adapted, sit on a rubber ring.
Yeah, there you go.
Right?
There you go.
That's really easy.
So Kemi Badenoch, she's on the right track. She said, why are we giving cars away to people with food intolerance? OK, but once again, she should listen to us. I can put this case a lot better than her. You know, she just doesn't quite get just how grotesque and obscene Motability is.
Absolutely blimmin' crazy.
By the way, the boss of the boss of Motability earns £750,000 a year.
What? You just can't. I mean,
if you didn't laugh, you'd cry, wouldn't you?
The self-indulgence indulgence, the profligate ways, the madness. Oh, we need the brightest and the best from the commercial sector to run this scheme. We better pay him $750,000. What's he going to do? Oh, he got hemorrhoids, have a car.
Yeah.
Like, you can't make it up. Now, talk to me about Gregg Wallace. I don't follow telly stuff a lot, but you, as a great harridan of the television world, he's gone now, hasn't he?
He's gone, yes.
He was accused of doing all sorts of grim things. He sort of turned around and gone, oh, it's because I'm autistic. And the autism charity's gone like, nah, that don't mean you can grope people's mind.
Yeah, exactly right, exactly right. Now, the autism and mental health issues that Gregg now complains that he suffers with, they only seem to have emerged since he got into trouble.
Mate, he just wants
BBC.
a free car, doesn't he?
So, yeah. So he was suspended from MasterChef last November. People go, oh, where did that come from? It was complaints from women on the staff, of course. People go, where did that come from all of a sudden? No, not really. He'd already been kicked off a show called Inside the Factory. So that was when he used to go to where they make baked beans, so you'd see how the process is. You're telling me you get through 22 million tonnes of baked beans in a single week? Struth! That was that show. He got kicked off of that for inappropriate behaviour, so it wasn't out of nowhere that he was in trouble. And I know personally that for many years there's been talk about Gregg Wallace. I was once in a makeup room, having been, before a TV appearance, having my makeup done. I should have had it done here, by the way. Sorry I look so bad. I didn't get any makeup on. I know I usually look brilliant, but there you are. Anyway, I was next to Gregg Wallace. Yeah. And I could see what his shtick was. Pretty young girls doing our makeup. He's telling these disgusting jokes. He got, sex jokes. That was his thing.
Because you and I are not exactly sort of Me Too movement, politically correct. We need a sort of, safe space and trigger warnings. That's kind of the opposite of what we are. So if you're saying that man was making some sick jokes.
I'm not particularly old school about that politeness around women, but there are things you don't say around women, and he didn't really observe that.
Gregg Wallace has probably earned more in a single year than most people work in a lifetime, so he can just open up a non-tax-free ISA and get on with it.
So
make like Gino D'Acampo and move to wherever he's off to.
So we're now at the stage where he's being dismissed by the BBC. A long letter written by the head of compliance at the BBC, who no doubt earns about $500,000 a year or something,
no doubt,
saying you can never work at the Beeb again. He now is saying, well, I'm not going quietly. Hired lawyers and all that, and he's saying they never took on board my mental health issues. They never took on board my autism, and that's why I didn't wear any underwear, because of my autism. I mean, that's what he's saying. And the Autism Society said, well, we've never heard of this before. Apparently, because of his autism, he had an aversion to labels and tight clothing. So that's why he didn't wear underwear. Perhaps it also explains why he used to run around the studio in front of the ladies with nothing on apart from a sock on his manhood.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. That's just comforting. That's autism.
I'll tell you seriously, though, Alex, and I want to caveat this, that I think, because I know about Gregg Wallace, he deserves to go. That said, there's a slight caveat. Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, the other day sort of wrote to Tim Davie in the slipstream of the Bob Villan, the Glastonbury debacle, death to the IDF and all that, saying, what, Mr. Davie, what is it that you actually have to do at the BBC to be fired? Nobody ever seems to get fired, because the people responsible for Bob Villan were asked to step back.
Yeah. With a golden handshake.
So Lisa Nandy said, what do you have to do? I'll tell you what you have to do to get fired at the BBC. You have to be working class. You have to be Jim Davidson. You have to be Jermaine James.
You have to say you like Brexit, basically. Yeah,
you have to be Gregg Wallace. Yeah. If you went to Eton and Oxford, no chance you ever get fired. So in one aspect, Gregg Wallace is a victim of the BBC's prejudice against the working class. But apart from that, he does deserve to get sacked.
Oh, like I said, maybe you can follow Gino D'Acampo to Australia, to Sex Pest
Do you mean
Island.
the Italian burglar? You know the beginning of it.
Right.
He was caught in Paul Young's bedroom stealing. This guy. So they go. Well, I can't imagine why Gino didn't really work out. Well, the man was a thief. He was a burglar. Also, they go, oh, he was inappropriate around women. He used to sort of flash and all this kind of thing. Well, when he was at the height of his stardom at ITV, he used to go on, and the ITV, he used to go onto This Morning to cook dishes wearing just an apron. They embraced it.
They loved it.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a big hypocrisy with the way these TV channels behave when they get rid of these people. But what do you have to do to get fired at the BBC? Be working class. There you go.
Be right wing.
Yeah.
There you go. No, it's true. Bang on. Right, there you go, folks. We're going to be taking a short break now, but don't go anywhere. We're taking your calls and reading your messages and playing out your voice notes just after this.
The other thing that concerns me about that, the narrative that I'm talking about now is one that you will agree with, I'm sure, and most people will, but it has, with the rise, and this isn't a criticism of reform, they've done incredibly well in sort of building the momentum that they have, but this unworkable scheme that they've got, it's very seductive, very attractive idea, 4-point plan for stopping the boats, does not survive contact with political, diplomatic, legal, or operational reality.
Hello, welcome back to the show. It is the moment in which we hit up the phone lines and play the voice notes. So let's first of all have a little listen to Richard.
I think we are just desperate to be liked by the rest of the world. And it's just pathetic. It's just begging for praise. And I think basically the reason we're putting up these people in these hotels is because we're just very insecure in the establishment. And we just want to be liked and admired and set an example to the rest of the world. If they knew that the rest of the world were laughing their socks off at us and calling us pathetic behind our backs, they might grow a bit of a spine.
Yeah, liked by whom? I think they just want to be liked within their own social circles. The rest of the world, like you said, aren't liking us for being soft touches. People used to like good old Britain back when it was a seafaring nation, back when it was sort of, you know, a brilliant, strong, world-leading force. All the inventions we've given to the world, the internet, the computer, the telephone, the television, vaccines, you name it, we invented it, the steam engine. We used to be brilliant and the world admired us for it. It's so much so they all speak our language. But no, not anymore. We've become a self-indulgent basket case. Shall we have a little chit-chat on the phone? Let's speak to Ian, who's in London. Good afternoon, Ian.
Good afternoon, Alex. Two little very minor sort of things. You know, when we left with Brexit, did we suddenly do a trade tariff on irregular immigrants? It seems like Macron is saying, well, because you left Brexit, we're going to sling more irregular immigrants over to you. And if that's the case, does that mean the European courts of law are going along with it, which must be illegal as well?
Do you know, you make an interesting point there. What would Donald do? We're no longer in the customs union, so we can set our own tariffs, rates, should we wish. Of course, Starmer won't do that because he blimmin' loves the EU and wishes we were still in it. The easiest way to sort this out in France would be like, right, you know all that cheese we eat that we import? Well, guess what? We're going to now whack a 75% tariff on it. I'll tell you what, the Gilets Jaunes and the French farmers will be out there spraying manure all over the Élysée Palace. They'd soon have to think again. Why aren't we doing that? That'd be a great idea.
And can I ask one other thing? Did you notice, if you noticed the video that you showed just before with Macron coming up to number 10, he's dragging his wife. If you watch, he's got her hand under his arm and he's dragging her. Right, I wonder if that's still the repercussions of her slapping him as he got off the plane.
No, listen, there's been... Did you actually read the people who are there sort of stirring the pot and coming up with all these conspiracy theories that she's actually her brother and that she's... or just really horrible things. Look, whatever one might think of Macron, I really do not appreciate the sort of wickedness and the spite and the nastiness of making out like she's had a sex change. That is just really below the belt. No, but the people who've been saying that have gotten away with it.
That is stupid.
In the French courts of law, they've literally gotten away with it and can carry on doing it. It's a funny old relationship, mind, innit? Poor Bridget. I reckon she's probably quite cool. I mean, Macron's an annoying little twerp, isn't he? But I reckon with Bridget, you'd probably have a, you know, decent gossip over a glass of muscadet.
But it is funny, like, was it that in one of the papers they had that he was giving the wink to the Princess of Wales?
Oh, yeah, that's just one of those moments, isn't it? He's not even winking his arse, his eyes sort of half closed, and it's just, you know, photographer gets in, goes, here he is, Prince Charming, chatting up our Kate. I don't think anyone would be charmed by Macron, which is why he's having to date a granny. No, I mean, he's a... I tell you what, sometimes I look at Britain and go, oh, gosh, Starmer. But then you kind of think the French are doing the same about Macron, aren't they? They're like, oh, God, why have we got this guy? Seriously, Lord help us. Thank you ever so much for your call, Ian. Let's have another voice note, shall we? This is Kevin.
I'm really beginning to wonder whether we have a democracy at all. You vote parties in, they promise you earth. I don't expect the earth, but you know what? I expect them to do most of the policies that they promise. And one of the biggest policies has definitely been immigration. And none of them are choosing to reduce immigration. I don't understand why they're doing it. I just don't understand it.
I don't either. I really don't understand it either. I just, you know, I can't figure out what Kool-Aid these people have drunk to decide that actually having loads of people break into your country from rogue states, which are hotbeds of terrorism, is a good idea and is somehow virtuous. I don't understand why we need far over 500,000 people coming into the country every single year as part of our workforce when there are people sitting around not working and getting a free car because they can't poo. I mean, just all of it is so utterly ridiculous. It is so ridiculous. If you know, say we like fast forward 2 centuries into the future, or 3 centuries into the future, 1,000 years into the future, and we look back at this period in time, the downfall of European civilization, and it's written about in, well, not written about in textbooks because people will be sort of like, I don't know, receiving things subliminally via AI, that actually what happened is we just allowed anybody from anywhere to come into the country, commit crimes, you know, attack our women and girls, undermine our values, while, you know, giving massive handouts to people for absolute... I mean, we just felt, well, that was a stupid idea. No wonder your civilization collapsed. Make it make sense. Let's speak to Anne in Sussex. Good afternoon, Anne.
Good afternoon, Alex. The reason I rang, golly, there's so many reasons, but it was, you know, the Starmer Macron show. Why haven't they asked to have our money back? What have we given them? I don't know how many millions of pounds, and all they've done is to slash one boat. They're laughing all the way, and I'm sure part of it, of course, is revenge because of Brexit. But when you look at the fact that so many people are wanting to come to this country, why is it allowed? Well, because our birth rate is so low, and there is this big story in the Western world that the birth rates have fallen so low that they've got to take immigration to increase their birth rates. Well, you probably know that with, 10 million babies were aborted in this country. So don't complain if we have to take people from other countries because of the silly policies and the recent one they brought in.
Oh, do you know, Anne, it's a subject we don't really talk about enough, really. But you would think that giving birth and having a child and going to work was some sort of a great onus upon society, that it's a dreadful thing, that this is some sort of new wacky idea that we have, that having children should be supported. It drives me mental. You know, you go to work in an office in London and they've got like a breakout space and they've got their, like, you know, gym and their coffee cart. Where do you put the kids?
Alex, can I just add? Well, if you tell people that the world is going to hell in a handcart, and who wants to bring children into this world, which has been a deliberate policy to frighten people off of having children, or to make women work longer and they put off having babies and then it's harder to have them. There's been some really deliberate policies carried out by senior politicians in our country over many years. The biggest birth rate was in the 60s, of course. But that is only one part of the issue. And before I go, could I urge people to look at what has gone on with BlackRock, who really are dominating the world, and their associates?
Blimey, we're getting into old Pandora's box of stuff here. Interesting line, though, Anna. You're absolutely right when it comes to these huge corporate entities that are buying up so much stuff. They're more powerful than the supranational governments. And BlackRock basically is the biggest of the lot of them. But blimey, if only I had a chance to get into that. But alas, I do not. But thank you so much for your call, Anne, in Sussex. Now, we're going to take a short break now. But when we come back, we're going to be talking about this ridiculous migration deal with the shadow Home Office Minister. That's after this. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. We have the problem, the silver bullet to solve the migrant crisis. That is why the French Prime Minister and our Prime Minister met up the other day, French President, sorry, met up the other day and held a joint press conference saying, this is it. We've got to have an important deal. It's going to be groundbreaking. We're going to send back 6% of people who cross over illegally into the UK to France. How? Who? What? Well, oh, I don't know. Don't have the details yet. It's a pilot scheme. We can't say anything. It might undermine it as deterrent. What absolute rot. Let's speak now to the Shadow Home Office Minister, Katie Lamb MP. Good afternoon, Katie. I mean, when is a deal not a deal? This.
It's not a deal, it's a joke. We don't even really know what it's going to involve. We don't have any of the detail, and the nature of these sorts of problems and solving them is that all of the devil is in the detail. What we need is a deterrent. It has to be the case that everybody who comes here illegally has to leave, that they can't be able to stay, they need to be detained, and then they need to be deported. This deal is not going to do that.
No, I tend to agree with you there. But the problem I have is the Conservative Party keep pulling this lever and saying, we had the silver bullet, we had the solution, we had the Rwanda plan. If only we had been able to stay in government, it would have worked. But the problem is, it wasn't working, was it? Because there was about one geezer who got given $3,000 to go home, and that was it. Because as per usual, the leftist lawyers, all of these immigration lawyers, get involved and scupper any chances of getting something done.
Well, as you say, you're totally right. The last government clearly didn't stop the boats, or we wouldn't even be having this conversation. I am a new Member of Parliament, and what we need to see now is an actual solution to this problem. Now, as you mentioned there, the Rwanda deal didn't ever begin. It was never started because of all sorts of legal problems and delays. But the logic remains, if somebody comes here illegally, they either have to go home, if we know where they're from and we can send them home safely, or they need to go somewhere else.
So what would the Conservative plan be now, given that the previous one clearly didn't work? I mean, Nigel Farage thinks he's got the answer. He says we just upset France and turned boats around. We've given them enough money. They've had their chance. You know, we're not going to end up in some sort of international court of law for upsetting the French. Let's just get on with it and show them that we're not going to allow people to break into our country illegally. What would the Conservative plan be?
Well, the Conservative plan now has been laid out in a few different amendments in Parliament, some of which I and Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, have laid to the Borders Bill, which the government passed recently. But it's a combination of deterrence, so sending people to a safe third country. Rwanda is the one that we currently have an agreement from. But lots of other things as well, like crucially disapplying human rights law when it comes to maintaining the border, because within the confines of the obligations that we currently have, it's just not possible to do this.
So basically you're saying that we're going to have to leave the ECHR and dig up the Human Rights Act?
We are going to have to, at least, so my personal view is that we can't achieve lots of things across the whole of government whilst we remain members of the ECHR, but certainly when it comes to maintaining the border, we cannot do what we need to do within the Human Rights Act and within the European Court of Human Rights.
Where would people come who've already come into the country? We know that under the previous Conservative government, the processing time was absolutely enormous. There were people lingering around for years on end, waiting to have it determined whether or not they had a right to be here. When most people applied for asylum, about 75% were told yes, one of the highest rates across Europe. You know, what are you going to do about that? People have broken into the country illegally. Would you still put them in hotels?
Well, we are actually in a position to change that, as in when one is in government. At the moment, the Conservative Party isn't in a position to change that, but you can change the law on various precedents. So we had a few different rulings in this country that have been used as precedents to drive the acceptance rate up and up. And as you say, the processing time was lengthened and lengthened, actually in some respects because of a good rule, which was to say that if you come here illegally, then you can't get asylum. So all of those people were sort of in suspended animation for the period of time that we were waiting to deport them. All of that is what needs to be fixed, and the only way to do that is to change our legal framework.
OK, but where would people go? Let's say you have managed to speed up the asylum applications. We also know that a load of these people are told to throw their passports in the water, so you don't know who they are and where they come from, so it's a bit difficult to send them home. Where would you put these people? Would you put them in hotels?
No, in immigration detention. So that's what I mean by detain and deport. Anybody who comes here illegally should be held in detention until they leave the country.
So you were saying if the Conservatives got into power, say there was a snap election tomorrow, you guys would build a load of detention centres to house how many people? 100,000, 200,000?
Well, the need for detention capacity basically is about how quickly you can cycle through the processing and get people to leave after they've arrived. And of course, the name and the aim of the game would be to make that short as possible. I mean, ideally it would be minutes, but certainly, working days.
Right, but we're talking about you would build what? Detention centres with what sort of capacities? How many would we need?
You would need detention capacity sufficient that you could manage whatever you felt that time frame is going to be. Say it was 5 or 10 working days, you would need enough detention capacity to hold people for 5 or 10 working days before they left the country.
So you'd build massive encampments around the country. What sort of accommodation?
Well, you shouldn't, the whole point of a deterrent is basically that you shouldn't need to do that. So if people know that if they come here they can't stay, they will essentially stop coming. Now, there'll be a transition period where you would need to build detention capacity to hold them temporarily, but once the system works, people stop crossing. And that should be the aim of everything that we're doing, is not just to detain and deport, important though that is, but to deter, to stop people from coming here in the first place. And that would work. If you came here and you couldn't stay, people would just stop coming.
Why can't we just declare a national emergency? We've already got evidence that some of the people coming over in those small boats are directly connected to terrorism and have committed acts of harm and criminality on our soil. Why can't we just declare a national emergency, send the Royal Navy out into the Channel and go, no, boats aren't coming in, we're taking you back to France?
There are various operational reasons that I am not a kind of naval expert, but people who are say that it's difficult. My personal view is that I don't think that they're insurmountable. But at the moment, the situation that we have is when people cross the Channel, they want to be rescued. So Border Force come up to them and they're very happily taken onto the Border Force boat, and we sort of tow them to shore, which lots of my constituents find very frustrating. In the sort of scenario that you're talking about, you would obviously need some kind of military response because people aren't going to want to be picked up. That's not easy to do, but my personal view is that it's not impossible.
Now, that was clearly the sort of policy echoing from the halls of Reform UK headquarters. Are you worried about the Conservative Party hemorrhaging people to Reform UK? The latest defection has been Sir Jake Berry. Would you want to go?
Well, we are only a year from probably, I think, the greatest electoral loss in modern British history. The Conservatives lost more seats in the general election of 2024 than any government ever. The public were very angry. I completely understand why. As I say, I'm a new MP. I was elected at that election, and they're not ready to forgive the Conservative Party yet. My belief is that the solutions to this country's problems are Conservative, but the job that we have now is to earn back the trust of the British people.
If you thought you weren't going to win your seat next time round because the Conservative Party is still dismally unpopular, Reform UK were going to get into government, would you contemplate jumping ship as well?
What I am doing and what I'm interested in doing is promoting and championing and fighting for and standing up for Conservative values and what the public believes in.
Conservative values are the same values as being espoused by, one could argue, Nigel Farage. But that wasn't a no then. If you sort of, read the writing on the wall and thought the Conservative Party's over.
There are clear differences. I don't think there's anything Conservative about supporting raising the two-child benefit cap, for example.
So you would never contemplate yourself going to Reform? Out of the question.
It's not even something that I'm thinking about.
OK, not a no then. Maybe you might think about it at some point in the future. Thank you ever so much, Katie Lamb, Shadow Home Office Minister. There's a very easy answer to some questions, isn't there? Which is just no. She didn't say it. Didn't say no, so you have to make of that what you will. I'd imagine a lot of Conservatives are looking at the situation going, this is a joke now. What a pantomime of a party. Although she did say we're only a year from that pretty catastrophic general election. Let's see what happens over the course of the next 4 years. Now, we've been talking about the madness of the United Kingdom, the self-indulgence, the profligate waste, the balmy ideas, you know, giving cars to people who got constipation and so on and so forth. Well, don't you worry, because this government has come up with the solution to all our problems. I don't know why apparently we need this at all. I don't know who came up with this madcap plan. But they want to open state-subsidised restaurants. What? They want restaurants, like government-run restaurants. Why? What on earth? Who's going to want to do? Who wants to go down to, like, the communist kitchen, huh? And have a bowl of gruel? Absolute madness. We're going to be discussing that with Chris Snowdon, head of lifestyle economics from the IEA, after this.
Sickness bill is going to hit £100 billion by 2030 every year, of course. That's £100 billion every year just on sickness benefits alone. Yeah. And a lot of that being driven, as we've been saying, by this huge increase since the pandemic in these mild conditions. So something needs to be done. And with Reform riding high in the polls, we might have hoped that Reform and Nigel Farage would be saying things that would encourage us that they were going to grasp this nettle.
Hello there, this is the final seggy of the show, isn't it? So let's squeeze in some messages before we chat about this absolutely bonkers story that I've picked out of the papers today. Actually, I didn't pick it out of the papers. My producer, Ted, picked it out of the papers today because he is a discerning gentleman. Right, Julian Bromley says, I thought it was smash the gangs that would work. Now it's break the model. You couldn't make it up. Labour don't believe in returning anyone to anywhere. If they wanted to break the model, you just stop giving people blimmin' hotels with full board. You know what they live in Calais? Makeshift canvas things. They're not given hotel rooms in advance. That's why they want to come here, because they get the hotel room, they get the house. They can work on the black market. Why wouldn't they want to come? That's how you break the blimmin' model. I despair the hypocrisy of your guest Paul Scully. They are to blame. This is the Conservative former London minister. They are to blame for the decline of this country. They did nothing to stop it. Hence, nobody listens and believes them. Hence, they're bottom of the poll, says Rob in London. Now, Carey from West Berkshire says, if that interview of Katie Lamb was a game of chess, I think you have just put her in check. Nice one. We could see you enjoyed that one. Good work. I wasn't trying to sort of enjoy it. I just asked her a really simple question, seeing as it seems to be vogue at the moment in the Conservative Party to read the writing on the wall and go to reform. I just asked her if she'd do the same. I'm amazed. I'm amazed that she couldn't actually just say no. Why does she obfuscate? You know, she's all the circumlocution. The answer's just no, mate. You know, just say no. But she didn't. Right, now, get this story. The government are going to open 2 state-subsidised restaurants, hand out fresh fruit and veg vouchers, and have a mobile greengrocer delivering nutritious food to deprived communities. This is its way of helping struggling households. There are 6 projects across the UK who are going to share £8.5 million in government funding in a bid to make good food more available to the people that need it. Well, here's some information for you. I think the average single mum in a housing estate doesn't want to be given fruit and veg. They just want to put some, you know, oven chips in and feed that to their kids, because that's easier for them and it's cheaper for them. They probably don't even know how to cook fruit and veg. Let's speak now to Chris Snowdon, Head of Lifestyle Economics at the IEA. First of all, what on earth is this government state-backed restaurant? Like, what is that? The communist kitchen? What is going on there?
It's bizarre, isn't it? We seem to be behaving as if we're a super rich country that can afford to spend money on any kind of gimmick or idea or anything that sounds kind of nice. It doesn't make any sense. It's such a strange thing to do. I mean, what is inaccessible about food at the moment? You go into any supermarket, all the fruit and veg is there. I don't know what kind of food they're actually going to be serving up in these nationalised restaurants, but it won't be anything that you can't get somewhere else. It's just addressing a problem that doesn't really exist in a very big government expensive way. You can be sure that a nationalised state subsidised restaurant is going to be much less efficient than any others. It might, if it's successful, succeed in putting some real businesses out of business, but it probably won't even do that. It will just suck up a whole load of money from the taxpayer as usual.
I mean, what is mad about this to me, and like you just said, if you want to buy fruit and veg, you can. It's cheaper than meat. It's cheaper than protein. That is the thing about fruit and veg. It is easily more affordable. And if you wanted to feed your kids healthily, make sure they get their 5 a day, you probably could do it on a tight budget. Probably could do it more effectively on a tight budget than buying all the junk food that people buy. What do they think's going to happen? The little kids are going to be sitting there, hear the bing bong chimes of the Sproutmobile coming around the corner, go, "Mummy, Mummy, please, I want some asparagus."
I mean, if it's about people who are really on a tight budget, they're not going to be in restaurants anyway. You know, restaurants for the majority of people are a rare treat. So I think it shows how out of touch some of these people are, that they think that the way to get low-income people eating more healthily is to build restaurants and have them subsidised by the taxpayer. I mean, normal people go to supermarkets, they buy food, they come home and they cook it. They might not be cooking the kind of food that Wes Streeting likes, but firstly, that's not really any of his business. And secondly, he's not going to change that by subsidising, I don't know, whatever, you know, carrot soup they're going to be serving up in these silly new restaurants.
But I mean, it's also this mental idea of these sort of greengrocers vans that are going to, the Queen of Greens bus. It's going to be bringing affordable fresh fruit and vegetables to communities across Liverpool and Knowsley. I mean, like I said, yeah, a kid's going to get excited by the ice cream van. They're not going to, you know, be running out the front door because the, you know, Sproutmobiles come along. I think what's gone on here is back in the day, you know, my grandparents obviously were from the World War II. My mum was born in the time of rationing. People back then knew how to cook and knew to how, you know, to make a little go a long way. They had to. The problem now is people actually just don't know what to do in a kitchen. That magic bus selling fruit and veg ain't going to change that, is it?
No, you're right. The people don't know how to cook, and that actually is a symptom of affluence, not poverty. Clearly, your grandparents were significantly poorer, whatever they were doing, than most people are today, probably nearly anybody today. And that's why they had to make a little go a long way. That's why they ate so much in the way of vegetables, because it's actually a lot cheaper than meat and fish and so forth. So the government and the whole public health lobby in general just get this issue wrong. They think that people aren't eating the kind of food they think they should be eating because of cost and availability. And it's just, you have to be so out of touch, really, with just even what a supermarket looks like to really believe that. The reality is that people mostly can afford, even if they're quite poor, can afford to eat tasty, let's call it what it is, tasty food, which is high in calories. And the reason that human beings find it tasty is precisely because it is high in calories.
But you're right, actually, it is about self-indulgence and affluence. The fact that people have lost some of the most vital life skills. Going back to my grandparents, both of them grew vegetables. You know, they had a council house, but in the garden of that council house, they would plant all manner of things. So that didn't cost anything apart from the cost of a packet of seeds and a little bit of toil in the sunshine. They were able to put food on the table that they'd grown themselves. I wonder how many people now in sort of working class estates can do that.
Well, not many, and to be fair, there will be plenty of people who don't have that opportunity, they don't have a garden and don't have an allotment. So I don't think that's not what's stopping them eating vegetables, which are ridiculously cheap now in supermarkets. It's about choice, and the reality is people are making choices that West Streeting disagrees with, and rather than accept that there's never been more choice, whether it's restaurants or normal grocery retail, he assumes that the government needs to come blundering in with its vegetable buses and its subsidized restaurants. If these things had real demand for them, and perhaps they do, then the private sector would be supplying them. They wouldn't need to be subsidized by the state.
No, I totally agree. Listen, Chris, I fancy inviting you on a date. How about next summer we go to Nottingham and go to the government special restaurant and do a little taste test?
Yeah, you're on. OK, if it's still going by then.
Oh, it'd be brilliant. We'll troll it hard. Chris Snowdon, thank you ever so much. Head of Livestock Economics at the IEA. If you had, like, the special Sprite-mobile come round, bing, bong, bing, bong, bing... What, do they make that noise? I don't know.
Special what, mobile?
Yeah, so basically the government's got this plan that they're going to send round these vans selling, like, you know, cut-price fruit and veg to, like, the poorest housing estates. Because their kids can't wait for that, can they?
Wow. Just send a kebab van round.
Yeah, they're basically, so instead of like the ice cream van, there's basically going to be this thing, the Queen of Greens bus. Apparently it's already been doing this in Liverpool and Knowsley since 2022.
Right.
They're now going to put extra money towards a mapping tool which will help target the vehicle's route to ensure it reaches residents in social housing who may find it harder to access healthy options. So yeah, can you, if you're a kid and you had the asparagus bus come over, would you be like, woohoo, come on,
bus.
kids?
Yes.
Let's all go. I want some peas.
The pumpkin Swede mobile of doom.
Have you read about these state-funded restaurants, though, that they're going to, like the communist kitchens this government wants to
I love that phrase,
roll out?
The communist kitchens.
I think they should get Gordon Ramsay in charge
because
of it.
they're obsessed with this idea that the state can always do